And I want to welcome everyone tuning in to another edition of Nuwapianism.com live on the Dagger Squad. And I want to thank Garfield for giving us this opportunity to use this platform to bring forward this presentation. Now, with this presentation, we'll be discussing Malachi York and the Nuwapian organization with two individuals who knew York well and lived on the property and were frequently invited in or had access in his house where certain acts occurred, among other things. The young man I'll introduce shortly lived in Brooklyn, in the Brooklyn community, as an Ansar back in 1988 and moved to upstate New York, where York took advantage of him at age 7. Then I'll introduce you to a young lady who lived in Brooklyn as an Ansar as well, and also lived on the York property in Eatonton, Georgia, Tamaray, Egypt of the West, and was present at the raid when the property was seized. And she'll be speaking to bring context to certain events that took place with regards to her. So I want to emphasize that this show is not focusing on the grotesque sexual acts that were perpetrated against them. That's well documented in the transcripts. If you did your own research, you'll be able to pull that up. And it's also been vividly explained in other shows that we've done on this platform, as well as on the my YouTube channel, where you can see those videos as well. So this is them wanting to talk about life within the Ansar community and the Nawapian cult. So let me introduce you to the sister Anna. Welcome, Anna. I don't know if you can hear me. Welcome, Anna.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, how are you, Anna?
I'm good. How are you?
All is good. And I want to
Okay.
welcome the brother King. King, you there?
Welcome. Hi. Yes, I'm here.
Hey, glad to have you. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
King,
Thank you.
let me start with you, and thanks again for making yourself available for the discussion. So if you can, would you take this time to give a little background on who you are and how you became part of the organization?
Okay. Without disclosing my full name or first name rather, basically, I was born in the community. Um, I was actually born in a Pittsburgh community where my family was stationed at or lived in, and then we traveled. We moved to different community sites, where we eventually moved to Brooklyn in '88. And about 2 or 3 years later, in 1990, I ended up moving up to Jezer Abba, also known as upstate New York, where uh, York took advantage of me when I was about 7 years old. And so basically, I'm here just to, share my story, um, and also to touch up on other talking points concerning upstate New York, because I think one of the things that I think is important to remember for most of the people involved in this conversation surrounding Malachi York is that a lot of people tend to neglect Jezer Abba, that time period where we transitioned from Brooklyn to upstate New York, then to Georgia. Many times in the conversation, people often talk about Brooklyn and talk about Edenton, Georgia, but they tend to neglect Jezer Abba. So I'm going to give my perspective, share my experience as it relates to being up there with you all, and then, just give some insights and everything else like that. So I'm glad you invited me here to be on this platform to share my story. So thank you.
And I appreciate that very much. And Anna, if you can, could you take the time to kind of give the audience and kind of a little background without revealing too much on your beginnings within the organization, and you kind of bring it up to just as similar to what he did.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Go
Hello?
ahead.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're
okay.
clear.
So yes, I joined the Ansar Law community with my family when I was basically like a young child, and stayed there, and then we moved to Edenton, Georgia, and then during that time I stayed in that community on the land on Tamaray until the raid happened, the FBI raid happened, and then that's when I left. So it's like I was there like most of my childhood, all the way until my teenage years. So it's like I have a lot that I know what took place and what went on. And I also was close to York. So I knew, seeing a lot of things with my own eyes, and that I know for a fact what happened and what occurred. Like, I'm not just talking from, no knowledge, or like somebody who lived outside of the community or outside of the land. Like, I was actually there, I knew the children, I knew him, knew his children, everything. So
this, you have a stronger, having a stronger working knowledge of
yes,
that took place.
Yes.
Because you were there, you saw it. So this is not one of those things between the two of you and what someone said. And that's what is needed, because there are a lot of people who
never lived up there.
Exactly.
Never was around him, never knew him. But they have, so much to say. And it's like, you don't even know what you're talking about, because you were never there, you never knew him, and you weren't even around. Mm-hmm. So it's like a lot of people, it's like when they talk, they have no idea what they're talking about, because they were never there, they weren't around him, and they never lived on the land or in the community in Bushwick or Jezreel Abba or in Edenton, Georgia on Tamaray. Mm-hmm. So
okay. All right, I appreciate that. So what I want to do is I want to first lay a kind of a foundation for the viewing audience. So because of the multiple transitions that the organization had metamorphosized into, the foundation goes back to the stage of Islam. So under Imam Isa, before we got into the whole Nuwaubian thing, I wanted to play a video, and I wanted, Sean, if you can pull it up, play a video to kind of give you an idea of how it kind of moved, and then take it from when the organization down in Georgia started taking on the name Nuwaubians. And then we'll, if necessary, we'll make commentaries in regards to the video, because there may be some things in there that people may want to may want to have explained a little more. But in a nutshell, that was how it transpired, or how it metamorphosized from the 1990s, from upstate, and then moving down to Edenton, Georgia. And so within that period, the name changed, the ideology changed, and then within that, there were certain acts that did not change. They only increased, and that was how he treated the people and how he treated the children. So I think that is something that we're going to go into. But what I wanted to do is, Sean, if you can pull that up, play that video, share your screen, play the video, that'll give people a chance to get an idea of where this thing, how it came to be.
All right, hold on 1 second.
Okay.
The following program is rated TVMA. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right, so I had to play that real quick for the Fair Use Act, and so we don't get strike.
what we're seeing actually here is sort of the heyday of the Ansar community back in Brooklyn. And that's when, you know, it was really thriving. You know, it was really big around that time. Around in the 80s, in the early sort of mid 80s is when they purchased the land up in upstate near the Catskill Mountains, where they, you know, developed Jazer Abba. And it wasn't a community where everyone was pretty much flocked to. York, it was very selected in terms of people who got to live up there. And so while majority of the people still lived in Brooklyn, there was a few families who were invited and who lived on the land in upstate. But this right here is sort of pretty much the heyday of the Ansar community back in Brooklyn.
Got you. Okay, so that pretty much was the end of it, was a stream of pretty much, like you said, a tribute, or a musical tribute to the dude.
Well, it was a video that was recommended because it kind of gave an idea for anyone watching to get us insight as to how it looked in those glory days, if you will, in the heyday period. The next video should kind of bring it to what most people are familiar with, Nuwaubians and the whole Egypt thing. And back then, in particular, it focuses on an incident that happened that really changed the game, which caused the downfall, at least the initial part, where the brother who's given the reporter a tour, he mentions that Ramesses is a club, when it was, at the time, it was zoned as being a storage unit. I think Jaro was mentioning it before, where you see this guy who was being interviewed, and he starts to talk about Ramesses Dance Club, and then you'll see the limousines outside, and that caused the officials in town to say, well, isn't this place zoned for storage? Why is there a club on this property? And that really kind of took it into this area, which you'll kind of see.
70 miles southeast of Atlanta, Eatonton is the seat of Putnam County, best known as the dairy capital of Georgia.
Oh, they got 400 and something acres. Goes up to that corner yonder.
William Larman is a dairyman, and he's talking about his new neighbors.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy for them.
But they are not dairymen.
Because they said they come from what? Ritz. Planet Ritz, I think.
It is not a joke to the people who've built these two large pyramids and elaborate Egyptian-style ornamentation and put up rows of double-wide homes on some 400 acres of rural Putnam County farmland and woodland.
How many people live here?
Got different families live here.
It's a place that granted our request for a visit inside the secured gate, allowed us to watch the workers build new ceremonial structures, allowed us to listen close up to the continuous chant broadcast from a speaker bank at the top of one of the pyramids.
For people that want to get spiritually in tune with the you know, in the cell.
But for the most part, sidestepped our requests for answers.
What about the guy from another planet?
We'll make sure you get all the newspapers
about that.
Are they a cult?
Depends on the definition of a cult. Certainly there are many characteristics similar with other entities that are defined as cults.
How long you lived here?
About 6-7 months.
Jerry, our tour guide, says he came here from Alabama. The sheriff says most of the other residents come from the Northeast, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore. How many, including how many children, is unclear.
He's Yanun?
He's known by many names.
The group's leader is identified in literature as Malachi Zodok York, the Supreme Grand Master. He is described as a charismatic speaker and apparently a prolific writer, producing monthly newsletters and dozens of books.
He says that he is from the 8th planet in the 19th galaxy of Eliwun, a universe far outside of this one. Does it make sense to you?
That's in the book. If he wrote it, then yeah. We're from Orion. Dr. York is from Risk. He's from Orion. What's the deal? It's nothing strange. It's just new to the public.
The vast majority of cults are started by an individual who's extremely charismatic, who's very confident, very commanding, in some cases very demanding, expects an awful lot of the followers.
So this is the Compound nightclub?
No, it's not a compound.
Oh, it's not a compound? I'm sorry.
Not at all.
The centerpiece of the Putnam County property is a nightclub the group opened in October. At midday, it was in high decibel preparation for an upcoming party. Outside, there were parked 3 stretch limousines.
It's an Egyptian theme park.
This is a theme park?
An Egyptian theme park.
You know, there's some people who think this is a cult.
Well, there's 2 ways to look at it. We don't happen to have a religious belief. You follow what I'm saying? Now, on the other hand, culture, there's a connection there. So if you say we're a cult in the sense of we found a culture that works for us, yeah.
Are they dangerous?
I have no information to indicate that they are dangerous.
What they are is a roadside curiosity to native Putnam Countyans, and to the folks inside the gate, a community with children and entertainment, and an Egyptian theme, and a leader they call Grandmaster, who writes that he's from another planet.
Maybe the spaceship come in here and I could get away with him. On it.
You see all that we're building out there?
Yeah.
Does it look like we're going anywhere soon to you? We building, it's so beautiful out there. It's a beautiful, peaceful environment where we invite any nationality, any race to come out and visit.
Brother King.
Yes.
Being as though you go back to 1988, can you kind of give the audience your perspective on how life was like up in Jazza Aba, and really what you saw, what you witnessed, how things transpired to where he started to do certain things, or was there a pattern? Because you know how some people will say that, well, I lived in Brooklyn all these years and I had never heard of anything happening with kids. So being as though you were there, and we already know, like I said, the same thing was attested to in the trial, but from another person who was there, how did things kick off to where he started to do these sorts of things?
Well, let me start off by saying, first of all, in reference to the in Brooklyn who may have said they never heard of anything happening to kids, that's so untrue, because even back then in the 80s, there were rumors circulating within the community that children were being molested, whether it was necessarily by York or other adults in the community, or maybe even by other children, was, a question, you almost have to kind of listen to who's telling you these stories or whatever. But nonetheless, there were rumors circulating around that molestation and rape going on back in the 80s in Brooklyn. Upstate, it's interesting that I was watching that video on how the land was set up. I visited that land only one time back in 1998 when York had this great celebration called the Savior's Day or whatever that lasted for a couple of days. My family, we went down to visit the land. I was still a teenager at the time. I think I was about 13 or 14 years old. And what, in comparison to that, Jazza Aba or upstate New York was very similar in a sense that, but it was on a much, much smaller scale. We see like some of the representation, we see some of the things that we've seen in terms of the Egyptian theme and everything like that. It was a little bit different upstate, because the one thing that you saw when you went on a land upstate, there was a mock Indian village sort of presentation right in the entrance of the land. As soon as you walk, you drove by and you go to the up the road, right off to the left, there was a mock Indian village. And so that's when he was sort of transitioning into this Native American sort of theme. Eventually, when we were on that land, we started wearing cowboy boots and cowboy hats and things of that nature. So he was kind of transitioning into that. But just to give you a little bit of idea of what was going on in the land upstate, again, upstate was a much, much smaller scale in comparison to Edenton, Georgia. It was very much relaxed. It was so, in contrast to Brooklyn, it was so different. The rules were pretty much relaxed. The parents, the adults the rules were not as strict. The women, for the most part, they took off their kimura and they were walking around without the kimura on and everything else, both married and single women, and they were rocking miniature afros at the time. And the environment was like I said, for the most part, relaxed in contrast to Brooklyn and so on. You know, the diet was different. I remember being back in Brooklyn, our main diet consisted of, you know, for breakfast, it would be hot or cold cereal. You know, for lunch, you get a typical sandwich. More than often, it would be like peanut butter and jelly. And then for dinner, mainly beans and rice. But when we got to upstate, I mean, we just ate all different types of stuff, from pancakes to sausages, different types of things. So everything was different, in contrast to Brooklyn. And one of the interesting things about upstate was that, you know, I remember when Doc used to have, I don't refer to him as Doc, I'm sorry, York, when he used to have the celebration up on the land upstate, and people would come up there. I remember the kids from Brooklyn and from other communities would come up there, and they would, you know, be in awe of the land, you know, the free range and everything, all the grass and the playground and everything else like that. And some of them were even jealous to the point where they would say something like, you know, you guys have it great up here. You know, you got all this land, all this fun, all this food and everything else like that. But little did they know that although to them, it seemed as though we were living in paradise, or, you know, we were actually going through hell, many of us, the children and parents. And so from my experience, you know, I can only recall maybe about a few kids being molested, but from what I've heard, there was more than just a few. Like I said, it happened to me when I was 7 years old back in '91. I remember another young girl who it also happened to actually before me. When it happened to her, she basically, on the land, they had this thing where, you know, the children would privately get invited over to York's house. On occasion, he would invite us in as groups. You know, the boys would come in, and he'll let us watch movies in his little miniature movie theater that he had in the house. Sometimes he'll let us run around in the house and so on. But for the most part, they had this situation where a child, I don't know how they did the selection process or whatever, what was the occasion, what was the reason, but nonetheless, a child was selected, and they would spend like a day or two, a night over his house. And this young girl who I was very close with growing up, we were the same age and everything, she went over there one night, and I remember when she came back, she started telling me everything that was going on and what York showed her and things of that nature. And basically, she was describing a pornographic movie. You know, of course, we were children. We were like, you know, gawking at like, you know, and everything else like that. But she described that, and she also described some of the things that he did to her, like things that he showed her sexually and everything. And then it got so crazy. And this is a truth that I'm sharing with you all right now, that after a while, after it happened to me as well, we began to play with each other, and we were doing sexual act on each other. So, you know, this thing, as it relates to the molestation, it's more than just, you know, kids being touched or kids being, you know, sexually assaulted in a way. Because what happened with many of the kids as a result of being molested, we were in turn performing these acts that we learned on each other. Wow. And so, but nonetheless, you got to remember that we were taught these things. Kids don't just grow up, you know, just start doing things without, you know what I mean, without having some sort of experience to that. And that's exactly what happened. And so when you hear these stories about, you know, sometimes these people, again, outside of the community who don't know what was going on, saying, oh, well, we heard that you guys were having sex with each other. Let it be understood that it happened occasionally, but it was as a result of us having learned from it. You know, these things were done to us. And York being the number one culprit, although he wasn't the only one who was molesting children. Well, there were other adults as well. But so that's the story. So she came back and was telling me this story, and, you know, eventually it happened to me. You know, I was invited to his house and everything, and it happened that night. And without going into details, it was just one of those, just very crazy experience and very crazy feeling, because I remember a few days afterwards, you know, all the sisters that were on the land, they started looking at me different, you know, and I started feeling weird because it almost as if they knew what had happened to me. And this is why one of the reasons, and I'm going to bring up an issue, one of the reasons why I really wanted to come out here and talk and share my stories, but also to address an issue that I don't think anyone that I've heard of having this or engaging in this conversation surrounding this have really touched on, and that is the issue of accountability, and the fact that there were people on the land who knew what was going on. You know, parents, sisters, and brothers who knew what was going on in that land, and they remained silent. And so I'm addressing those parents now tonight, without, you know, implicating anyone in particular and saying any names or anything like that.
Oh, that's fine.
My reason for coming out here and sharing my story is also to point the finger at some of the parents that said, you guys need to take accountability for what happened to us children, because through their silence, they inevitably enabled York to do what he did to us. There were times where, like, these sisters, they saw us running back and forth. And it wasn't just the girls who were running back and forth in the house. It was the boys as well. You know, he used to treat us all the time. Like I said, he used to invite us in the house. He had a miniature movie theater in his house where he would often play movies for us. We would see, you know, a lot of Jean-Claude Van Damme movies and Kung Fu movies, Bruce Lee movies, and so on. And he would treat us with candy and popcorn and all types of stuff. And then we would also be invited in his house for other things as well. I remember I've gotten a tour many times throughout his house. I saw the studio that he had in his house. He had an indoor pool. You know, I've been pretty much all over the house, you know, including the bedroom. And but one thing I wanted to say is that there were parents on that land, including my mother and father, because both of them were on the land at the time, who saw these things happening as far. Now, one thing I want to say is that I'm not suggesting that the parents were involved in this stuff in terms of performing any of these acts on the children. But what I am suggesting is that they were clearly aware that something was going on. In addition to that, in addition to their own visual experience in terms of seeing this stuff, there were plenty of rumors circulating in the community on the land that York was doing this stuff to these kids, particularly the girls. Many of them, when I later, years later, after I started talking to some of these parents and asking them, well, what did you see and what did you think and all of this other stuff, and many of them would say, well, we saw the girls running in the house and we thought something was strange with that, but we didn't really know what was going on. And I call bullshit on that. Yeah. They knew exactly what was going on because in addition to them seeing it, they were talking about it as well. I remember being as a kid, I used to always sit underneath the table while the sisters used to sit around the table talking and gossiping and stuff like that. And I used to hear what the stuff they used to say. And they were aware that York was doing something to these children because they used to talk about it all the time. And none of them said anything. None of them spoke up, and I find it very crazy how it took so long for somebody to say something. I commend the sister who spoke up and who reached out to authorities and everything like that. But nonetheless, that same sister was on the land upstate and she didn't say anything back then. It was only when she was down in Georgia, eventually, even years later, she then spoke up and said something. Again, I commend her for that. But at the same, on the same token, I say that, she had the responsibility of saying something back then. And perhaps it wouldn't have happened to so many children because I don't think it happened to that many at that time. It certainly would have saved Anna from having been molested and so many other children, because it wouldn't have even taken it that far to Georgia. It would have stopped upstate.
Not even only that, but you have to think about it. It's been going on since the Bushwick days. And if somebody would have spoke up all the way back in the Bushwick days, then it wouldn't have continued on from Bushwick, New York, from it's Ansar Allah community all the way to Jezza Abba, all the way to Tamaray. Yeah. Like these parents, when Habiba got pregnant at 15 years old, like, okay, nobody said anything. Y'all didn't see that weird that a minor 15 years old got pregnant by this older man that was like in his 40s. Nobody said anything. They turned a blind eye. It was room workers that was working with them, and they knew that these girls were going into his house, coming back late and everything like that. And nobody said nothing. And then that's the silence continued. The fact that adults were silent, that's what made it continue from the Ansar days all the way to Jezza Abba, all the way to, Tamaray. And I feel like the authorities, Sheriff Sills, should not, when the letter was sent to DFACS in 1998, or probably earlier, and Sheriff Sills, it shouldn't have taken 4 or 5 years later for authorities to investigate. Nobody came on the land on Tama-Re to see or check on the kids to make sure they were okay. DFACS did not come. The sheriff did not come. Nobody came to check on any of the kids to make sure they were okay. And then they said, oh, it had to have been one of the children to come to them to say, oh, yeah, this happened to me, you know, whatever the case. But I'm like, no, when you hear a report about a child, you're supposed to act on it right away. And nothing was acted on right away. So I felt like at the end, Sheriff Sills tried to play like he's a hero, but I'm like, you allowed years to go by for more victims to get abused. And not only the abuse, like I was saying, there's also mental mind games that was being played by this man, you know? But it was like, if you do something he didn't like, it was like you were in trouble, and then he would just ignore you for however long he decided to ignore you until, you know, he wanted to talk to you. And then people have to understand too, it's not like you can easily just leave off the land, because we were not in touch with our families, because when you came into the community, a lot of people cut off ties from their family on the outside world. So they did not have access to communicate with their family and, you know, or say, hey, can you come and get me, or whatever the case may be, because there were no ties. And that's what allowed, like, a lot of people, it's like they didn't have a choice, you know, to like, because they didn't have that many options or anywhere to go. And then, you know, you didn't have a car. A lot of people didn't have an education, and you didn't have money like that either. So it's like all those, you know, and he would tell people, oh, you know, your family don't care about you. You know, why do you think they didn't come get you? Or they didn't come look for you? You know, they don't care about you, and that's why you're still here. And then, you know, when you're hearing these things, you kind of believe it, like, oh, wow, you know, nobody didn't come look for me or come get me. Nobody is trying to come find me. So you start believing what he's telling you, because, you know, nobody's looking for you. Nobody acted, you know, upon it to say, let me find out what's going on with these children up here. Let me go find out what's going on with these adults. And it's like, you thinking you're in this holy spiritual community when all along it's a cult, because you have no ties to the outside world. It's like you literally, you know, I mean, it's like, there's, you know, you can't talk to anybody, and people don't understand that. They're like, oh, you have the free will to leave. Yeah, you do. But when you are made to believe that, when you go out into the world, that it's a bad world, and, you know, you're something is going to happen to you, and, you know, you're scared. You know, you don't have a car, you don't have no money, you don't have an education. Where are you going to go? You don't even know your family's. Go ahead.
I think that's something that a lot of people lose touch with. They're not even familiar with the fact, because they always had this thing to say, well, you could leave at any time. But then they're not to account that.
Let's put it into context, and I don't mean to cut it off. Let's put it into context. What she's talking about, and particularly, you know, she's talking about it from the perspective of being a child. You know, when you're an adult, yes, you can leave whenever you want. You know, it wasn't a matter. Sure, yes, he manipulated people, and you know, there was a scare tactic being played in terms of why people wanted decided to stay. But nonetheless, they could have left. But as far as the children,
they could have. But it's like, the thing is, they could have, but you have to understand, a lot of them did not have ties to their families. They didn't have their contact information or anything like that. And it's
that's besides the point. Ahead. The point is that they could have gone. I don't care where you go, you could have left. Whether it, you know,
it's easier to say that, but when you're in that situation, it's a different story. You know,
I understand that, but at the end of the day, when it comes to your children, and you realize that your children is being abused, me personally, and I don't even have kids, but I have nieces and nephews who I have a very sensitive heart when it comes to kids and the abuse of children. Whenever you realize that your child is in a situation that is not healthy for them, be it their physiological need, emotional need, mental need, or whatever the case may be, and the fact that they are being sexually abused, and you realize that, I don't care where
And
you got to go.
But it's
you
like
got
the
to
thing
go.
is, some of these parents know that their children been sexually abused, but they still choose to follow this man.
And that was the problem. That's the reason why I'm addressing them in particular and talking about this idea of accountability and their role in all of this, you know, because they knew. And for example, for instance, when I finally told my mom about what happened to me, which was about 1.5 years ago, her response to me was that I always suspected it. I said, what? You always suspected it? And all these years you never said anything? You never done anything? You know, and I had to, for that moment, I had to refrain from continuing on the conversation because I was so upset and angry with her. I was like, you know, I got to shut up because if I say something, you know, we both going to regret this. So let me just let this go for now. I'll put it on the back burner. I'll have a conversation with you a little bit later. But her response was, I always suspected it, you know, and so many other mothers and parents.
But she didn't do anything about it.
But they didn't do anything.
Yeah,
they remained silent. And because of their silence, they ultimately enabled York to continue to do what he did to these kids,
And then you have to understand too that he was also blackmailing some of the women. And they were doing the same thing that he was doing as blackmail. So even if they wanted to speak out, he had blackmail against some because they were doing the same things that he was doing.
Yeah. And
so, we definitely have that I just want to touch on that point, because even when you look at the Ansar cult rebuttal to the slanderers book, one of the things that people are not familiar with, when you move into this community, at least for guys like myself, you had to fill out the application. And in this application, you had a lot of personal information. How much sex do you have? Do you have any venereal diseases? How frequent do you have these? How many persons you have sex with? On and on. A lot of personal information is requested that you fill out. Now, in the rebuttal book, individuals who took it upon themselves to be interviewed to explain life within the cult, in the rebuttal book, York takes their personal information and posts it in the book and gives the book away. So people are looking at these individuals. Oh, this person, they say this woman had X amount of abortions. She was sexually abused. She had this venereal disease. The guy had a venereal disease. He was homeless, etc. The whole thing was to make them look bad, to undermine what they're saying just off by destroying their character by this rebuttal book, as opposed to addressing the information that they were presenting as life within the organization with him. So I was just saying that to her point that people were being blackmailed. They were labeled as
brainwashed.
Yeah, they were labeled as nuts in the community. You can't trust this sister. She's crazy. She's too spiritual. Because remember, there were people who were considered spiritual in the community. And if you were too spiritual, you were considered spiritual, which is like a negative connotation to being someone that's spooked out.
Yeah.
You know. So the people who were saying that. Go ahead.
He also did other things too, where if you, for example, if you disagreed with him on something or you didn't like what he did, you know, he would call you a disagreeable person. You know what I mean?
Or a black devil.
Yeah, a devil. You know, I remember my mother worked in the office where they actually wrote and compiled the books that he sold out here and everything else like that. And she told me one time she got into an argument with him because she disagreed with a topic or subject matter that he wanted to put in the book. She said, you know, she disagreed with that. She did a lot of the research and everything along with several other women. And, you know, he called her a doubting Tom, and then he eventually called her disagreeable, you know. And it was so interesting because immediately after that, I noticed this change in her sort of status in relationship to him. See, York had a hierarchy system on the land upstate, and I'm sure it was the same in Brooklyn and also in Edenton, Georgia. But he had a hierarchy system by which individuals were closer to him based on his favorability of them. So, for instance, or his familiarity to use them for. Absolutely. So his immediate family, for the most part, would be closest to him, and then those who he favored or who who, like she said, you know, they could do for him or whatever the case may be, you know, they would have a certain higher status than other people. And so
that's true.
It was interesting because the houses that we lived in, these trailer homes that we lived in upstate, was even set up that way as well. We had 5 trailer homes all in a row. And then you had his house, his little mini mansion over here on one end. And the houses were, people were placed in the houses in terms of their sort of quote unquote status in relationship to him. So for example, his main wives or whatever you want to call them, you know, kind of lived in the first house. And then other women who he favored more would live in the second house and so on, along with some of their children.
Can I say something? He had that in Edenton too. He had the house down the hill that was closest to him with his favorite people. And then like up the hill was like,
he did
people that weren't that close.
So those who were pretty much on a lower end of the totem pole, you know, pretty much was farthest away from his house. And like I said, like, it was interesting because immediately after she had that little disagreement with him, we moved from the 3rd house down to the 4th, and then we eventually moved to the 5th house. And I thought, you know, as a child, I didn't understand. I'm like, well, why are we moving down here? You know, and looking back at it, I realized, okay, well, you lost favor, you know, and therefore he pushed you down. And eventually we ended up in the 5th house. You know, it's funny when you think about it, you're like, wow, you know, that's kind of crazy. And even
that was one of his in trouble, like when you were in trouble, when he would ignore you. Yeah, when he would ignore you for however long he wanted to ignore you for. And then it's like he would so play his little mind games, you know?
And everybody would ignore you.
Yes, it was like
you were shunned. You were pretty much shunned. You were shunned and shamed in that sense. And
you're like, well, what is he ignoring me for? I don't know why I'm being ignored. And you're trying to figure it out. But, you know, it's like when I was a teenager, and I remember one time walking by, and, you know, I think I said hi, and he didn't respond back. And I was like, okay, what is he ignoring me for? And, you know, I didn't let it bother me because, you know, I'm like, okay, well,
you didn't do anything.
You too. Yes. But, you know, it's like some people, it affected them. But me, I was like, okay, fuck you too. Okay, you ignore me, I'm going to ignore you too. Like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what kind of games you have going on. I don't know why I'm being ignored, but I'm not going to keep, why are you ignoring me? So I said, okay, we just going to be ignoring each other. So I didn't say nothing. He didn't say nothing. And then, you know, I guess whenever he decided that, hey, you know, okay, I see you again. And I realized those are mental mind games or mental abuse. And those things can have, it can have a long lasting effect when you get older in your personal relationships and everything like that. And it's like, I didn't understand it when I was younger. But when I think about some of the things he did, I'm like, he was, you know, that was a lot of mental
manipulation,
abuse, emotional abuse. Yes, that he was putting people through. And it was for no reason.
What I wanted to do, I wanted to bring Sister Ruby on, who authored a book, Soul Sacrifice. And she was also featured in the documentary and the book, Life in the Cult through People magazine with Nicole Lopez. So Ruby, just feel free to share, because you were upstate, I probably think around the same time that King was.
Okay, because so hi everybody. Everything that I'm hearing everybody say, it strikes a chord. It's like and nobody really understands unless you were there. Like when you try to tell other people about this type of thing, it sounds like a different world. It's a different world. And it like you said, there were games where, and if you were the type where you wanted to be accepted, and everybody wanted to be in his good graces, everybody did, because he was everybody's world, you know, like because you're in your own little world. You're not this is the only world that you're living in, and he's like the president or Michael Jackson or whatever, you know. He's the celebrity. He's the one everybody wants to be accepted by, to be seen by, to be recognized by, you know. And like you said, King, you when you were shunned, and you said that too, sister, when you were shunned, when he didn't speak to you, same thing happened to me. I think I said I was upstate in, let me see, I think I was 19 when I moved. No, wait. I might have been 19 in Brooklyn. And then by the time I got upstate, I think I might have been 21. I think I might have been turning 21. And then I went to Eatonton for a short period of time, because I left when I was 22, but I joined when I was 17, and I was in Brooklyn for most of the time. And then, so I was shunned several times. I got in trouble a lot, you know, for staying in touch with my family, mostly. And then upstate, but wasn't it Eatonton? I think I said hello to Ishmael, his son, one time, because I knew his wives. I was friends with his wives, and I was there when he had his first son, you know, with his first wife. And so I knew him, you know, I'd seen him, but I got in trouble for that. And I got shunned.
Because you know that he didn't like when one of his wives talked to anybody. He was very jealous. You literally had to hold your head down and walk real fast past
and just not even, I mean, you know, maybe walking into something because you're not exactly. Yes. It was just, it's sad. And then when I hear King say, as a child, it's so hurtful, because, you know, I worked with a lot of the children, and they were like my children. You know how it was. The children are your children. You know, you love them and you raise them the best you know how. But it hurt to know that there were people so brainwashed that they knew what was happening to their child and may have suspected it, but it just didn't occur to them to go against the master, quote unquote, you know, the teacher, the whatever. And it's
and even his closest wives, you know, Fatima, you know, Kathy, all of them, they was there and they saw, and nobody said anything. Nobody took up for the children, stood up or said anything. You know, y'all need to be held accountable too.
Yeah, and I was guilt-ridden for years, because one of the children came to me, one of my co-wives' children came to me and told me what happened. And that's the first time I ever heard about it. And I did try to go talk to him, but then I got scared. I was like, I'm up here. I don't know how to leave here by myself. Like, I can't run down a hill in Eatonton and run into the street. I mean, I didn't
it was
know
in the middle of the woods. It was in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, and literally when I got taken up there, I didn't have a driver's license. I know how to drive.
Yeah,
I think they either put blindfold over me or something. Something over my eyes where I couldn't even see where I was going. So it was just a scary thing, but I was guilt-ridden because the thought didn't even occur to me to reach out to cops or the FBI, because you're so conditioned to protect him. Yeah. And I wanted to protect her because I knew that was wrong, you know, even though I had co-wives who were 14 years old, but in my brainwashed mind, I thought that was, you know, she had her issue, because, you know, he always talked about, you know, the Prophet Muhammad and Aisha, how she was 9 years old, and then when a woman gets her issue, you know, no matter how young she is, she's a woman. You know, so you start thinking it's okay, but that wasn't okay either. That wasn't okay either.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like he was a pedophile before he even started the community, you know, because he was charged for statutory rape of a 13-year-old.
I saw that.
19. So I'm like, you started a whole community where you can get access to children, and you were already a pedophile. So this just gave him, you know,
he was molested.
Like a playground.
He was molested, and it's sad because the thought that when I remember during the trial, when the FBI subpoenaed a lot of us to testify, they never used my testimony because I was going to support one of the young girls' testimonies, but they didn't use me. But they brought me out to Brunswick, and I ended up meeting one of the counselors that she was, I guess she testified. I don't know what her testimony supported, but she was a counselor, and she said that she was a counselor that rehabilitated pedophiles, right? So I asked her, I said, you know, I was molested when I was a kid, but I would never want to do that to another child. I would never want to do that, make a person feel like I felt. You feel so afraid and terrified and vulnerable, and there's nothing you can do. You're powerless, and you are, because you're a child with an adult doing something to you that you don't even know. You don't even know what they're doing.
And it's really about that pedophile having power and control.
That's and she said some of them can't be, like, if it happens over years, they can't be rehabilitated.
And I don't think he could have been rehabilitated.
Nope. That's what she was saying to me. She was saying that it becomes a sexual orientation for a person when they've been abused like that for so long, you know.
Okay, I just want to interject a little bit, because it seems like we're just getting a little bit on the line of being a little bit sympathetic and empathetic to him. And let's just remember. I get it. Trust me, but it sounds like that. But what I want to do is just remind everybody that this guy,
director of the show.
I'm just listening. No sympathy, no empathy, because right now, and it's not just
he
him.
Don't have empathy or sympathy.
Absolutely not.
I respect that, sharing his story and everything, and I feel that, he was molested as a child, but it's no excuse for what he did as an adult, because when it happened to me,
100%.
I was 7 years old, and the brother was 47 years old, 46, 47 when it happened.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing, I just want to get back to getting on the parents again, because I'm very serious about
Not
this.
even on the parents. What other topics did we have to discuss over here?
Let me just touch on
after you talk about the parents, and we'll talk about some other topics.
Yeah, because the thing that I'm very angry and upset about, because my parents in particular, because we're looking at, some of these parents were on the land. It's different. It's different for the parents who weren't on the land when their children was up in, upstate, and they were down in Brooklyn, and they didn't know what the hell was going on with the children, which is still bad. I still blame them, because how the hell first of all, you let someone sit up there and separate you from your children. You're living in one city and your children are living in another city. You don't know what the hell is happening to them. Second of all, the reason why I'm so serious and upset about it is because both of my parents was on the land when this happened to me. Both of them. My father stood as a guard in front of York's house when I was going back and forth in his house. My mother worked in the office, writing these books, plagiarizing these books, along with so many other women when this happened to me. And so when I approached them and I shared my story with them and everything, and my mother says to me, I always suspected it. And when my dad pretty much has nothing to say, it's like, what the hell?
Like most of the other parents,
Yeah. And the reason why I want to talk so much about this, because I look at David, for example, David Noel, Tadic Noel, who went out there and he put himself out there on a limb, sharing all of his information, putting his private information out there, and all of this happening. And
that's right.
Personal information. And not a single parent stood up for him.
Nobody, not a single parent has came forward and said anything.
Every parent, for the most part, is being silent about this stuff.
Yeah.
And yet their children are coming out here, putting themselves on a limb and in very much danger, because there's so many people out there who are angry with them, who want to hurt them, the things that they said, for just telling their truth. And yet their parents are sitting there back there all quiet, not saying anything, not supporting them, not defending them. And another reason why I'm so upset, because even till this day, after telling my parents this stuff, not one of them has said to me, you know what, I'm sorry this happened to you. Not one of them. And I've tried to have conversation with them, but every time I try to talk to my mother about it, she always changes the subject. I can't talk to my dad about it because he's still a York supporter. He's a Nawapian right now.
Yeah.
Me and him do not see eye to eye. Because personally, as a son, I can't understand how a father, after hearing that your son came to you and told you that this man molested and raped you, and you still a staunch supporter of him, still sending money out to the cause and everything else like that, But let me just also remind other people about the word molestation, because I often see that, that has become somewhat synonymous with the York name. But let's put it into context. The word molestation, on its simplest term, is just, it could be something as simple as groping somebody or touching someone in a sexual manner.
Anything inappropriate.
It was more than molestation with us. We were raped. Okay?
You were raped.
Whenever there's penetration involved, whether it's a finger, whether it's a genital, whether it's your mouth, whether it's a toy, whenever there's penetration involved, that goes beyond molestation. That is rape. And we were raped. We were not just molested by York, we were raped. Okay?
You're right, absolutely.
And so these parents need to step up and start speaking up, because they know far more than we do. We were children. They were the adults. They were the ones who were supposed to protect their kids, and they didn't do that. They failed to do that.
Yep, and I agree.
And so 100%. I'm calling them out tonight, and they need to step up and take accountability for their part in all of this by not saying anything.
Thank you.
And then
Absolutely.
not only that, but it's like, you know, the other things that happen is that a lot of the children, their education got neglected, you know, because they were not in school. And so it's
and
like a
nutrition.
lot of them.
And the
Yes,
nutrition.
hell
those
yeah,
are,
yes.
those are areas that I want.
Underweight,
I was hoping that you would
malnourished.
touch on that because
Yes.
you people don't realize that. Okay, say
And
down in Georgia, just for example, then they have you had to go through the pylons, you had to go through the guards who carried guns. You were always taught that life outside of the tabernacle was a place of barren. You're going to be destined for failure.
You're going to get AIDS. You're going to die.
Yeah.
You're going to do all kind of scare tactics. All
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. So if you leave there and then you go out there, and in your case,
Chuck, I
and
was in the
your-
middle of talking.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to lay that groundwork. But you were talking. No. But you were mentioning that to me before that. You're like a parent. You were basically on Tamaray by yourself.
Yes,
Yeah.
a lot of the girls and like the boys, some of them went on the land by themselves without their parents.
Yeah.
And that was like the normal thing. I guess
Yeah.
maybe they trusted him so much, thinking that this is, you know, the leader. He's this.
They
holy
thought it was the
man,
best
whatever.
place for their children to be.
Yes,
They
it was
that's
like
what
the
they thought.
holy land.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was like, you know, the lion's den, and it
Yeah,
was, you know,
exactly.
he was like sacrificing
Exactly.
the kids, like,
Exactly.
you know, like he was the devil himself. So a lot of people feel like, I don't know, some people claim that he was doing voodoo or whatever, but I don't know. But I'm just like, none of this should have
That
happened
ain't
at
going to do
all.
anything for.
None of
I'm not
it
gonna
should have
compensate for
happened.
what he was doing to
No.
people.
None of it should have happened at all, you know. And
No.
it's like, you know, the fact that our education
And you can't even
was
put voodoo in
neglected
that category.
years-
Exactly.
for
That's not
years.
even.
But let me
Yeah,
ask you.
our education was neglected for years. Our health was neglected for years.
Yeah.
You know, malnourishment. Like some people had to leave the community to get their high school diploma to learn how to drive, not having no job experience at all because like you're working for hours as minors. Even adults were working for hours, no
Yeah.
lunch breaks, not getting paid, no health coverage, none
Yeah.
of that. You're just working around the clock with no money, nothing. You know, you just literally your whole life you're just working, and you know it's like that's child labor violation. You're not even supposed to be working long hours as a minor. Even as an adult, you're not supposed to be working long hours from sun up to sundown, and
Without
not getting
breaks.
paid for it. Yeah, no lunch breaks, no nothing. You know, no health coverage. Like a lot of people, they were sick, you know, because they weren't going to the hospital like that on a regular, wasn't going to the dentist on a regular. And some of the products we were using his products that he was making, and it was up there in that shed,
Yeah.
and it was getting bad, getting burnt from the sun. So the toothpaste was like brown, you know, half of it did not work. The deodorant wasn't working. I was like, okay, you know, and it's like, it was just so much neglect that it's like a lot of people don't talk about. And it's like, yeah, the molestation happened, and yes, parents need to be held accountable just as well as a pedophile that did it. But at the same time, there was mind games and manipulation being played on you know, everybody that lived up there.
Yeah, and
Education
you know, the
was
most
being neglected,
heartbreaking
our
thing-
health.
Anna, to touch up on what you're saying, you know, again, accountability. Our parents were going through this stuff just as much as we were going. Why didn't that motivate them to get up and leave? I remember being upstate, and I used to literally see women get into fights over feminine hygiene
Because the
products
thing
because there
is, you
wasn't
have to
enough.
understand,
My
it's
gosh.
easier said than done, but it's like so many of these people gave up everything to join this community, and they had nothing, you know?
Yeah, some people didn't know where their families
they
were.
didn't have families that they could just fall
Yeah.
back on and say, oh, I'm going to leave and go back to this person, because you have to understand a lot of
They
people
felt
were not
stuck.
in touch with their
Yeah.
families.
Yeah.
These people had nothing. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's easier for you to say it, you know, and like, you know, look at it in that way when you're not a part of it. But when you're a part of it, it's so much different, you know?
But I
That's
get,
like
I
when
get.
you're looking,
I'm sorry.
when you're looking
sister.
outside of someone's abusive
I'm not-
relationship, and you like, oh, you know, you should have did this and you should have did that. But it's like, you have to understand that it's so much more when you're being brainwashed and controlled and manipulated, and you have nothing. You have literally nothing.
Here's why I'm saying what I'm saying, because it's not, it is easy to said and done, or to, you know what I mean? But here's the thing. There were people who eventually were kicked off of the land. They didn't have nowhere to go. They lost in touch with their family, but eventually they found a way.
They figured it out.
Yeah,
So
but
my
I'm
point-
saying like try
I
to
get that.
empathize.
I get
you
that.
know,
I
as if-
empathize completely because I was one of those people. My family was eventually told to leave the land. When we were upstate, my family was one of the few families who were left on upstate because majority of the people who were upstate eventually migrated down to Georgia. We were up there. And my mom got a call from somebody down Georgia telling her that York wanted her and all of her kids to come down Georgia. And she was like, well, what about my husband? What about my mate? And the woman was like, well, York doesn't want him down there. And my mom, and I think this was the smartest decision she's ever made in her life concerning the upstate. She said, I'm not going down there without my mate. And then from that on, they basically told us we can leave the land. My dad, to this day, and he's an idiot, and I say it now, even if he's listening to this video, I don't care. He's an idiot for talking about this because he talks as if he's proud about this shit. But he talks about how when we left the land, all he had was a station wagon and $27 in his fucking pocket. Excuse my language. $27. He had 5 children and a pregnant wife who was a baby on the way, and $27 in his life. Now, he was one of those parents, one of those individuals, when he joined the community, he gave up everything for everything. But that's not the reason why I say what I'm saying, because I know my father. And I know that a lot of the reason why the main reason why he did not leave was not because he was afraid to leave, and not because he didn't have anything. It was mainly because of his pride. Because of the fact that he gave up everything, he disconnected from his family. He told everybody in his family that this was the thing, this was it. Everybody should join. The rest of the family said, no, we ain't going there with you. You do your own thing. His pride, he didn't want to go back
and then
home
you got to come
to those
back.
people and be like, oh, wow, you're back. What happened? You know what I mean?
And all of this happened to my family. Yeah,
absolutely.
On top of that.
So what I'm saying is that there are other parents who are just like my father who did not leave because of pride, not because they were afraid they didn't have.
And there were some people that did not have anything, and that's why they did not leave, and they were afraid.
The reality is no one had anything.
But I'm saying,
but the point is that once you left, you made it. You figured it out.
Yeah, but you can speak for your father, but it's other people, that have their own story. You can't just clump it all your father. You get what I'm saying?
But I'm
saying you have to understand and empathize with other people's situations as well.
Totally.
Because there were people that didn't have a damn thing. They didn't know how to drive. They didn't have any money. Nothing.
I totally
no job experience.
But you see, hold on, Anna, because what we're talking about here. You got to remember, when our parents joined the community, they were already adults. Many of them knew how to drive. Many of them had job skills when they came in.
No, many of them did not know how to drive. If you were from the city, listen to me. If you were from the city, no, you do not know how to drive. If you lived in New York City your whole life, yes, it is true.
Yes, it is
true.
For some, like New York,
you're used to taking public transportation.
Chuck, are you there?
But hold on, let me get back to the point, because I don't want to.
Because everybody talking to one another, so I can't understand anything anybody's saying. I was going to mute y'all.
Let's get back. Let's try to get back to try to stay on point, because I don't want it to get too far and then people miss.
Yeah, because I don't want this to be back and forth to us, because we're on the same page.
Let's just agree to disagree, King.
We're on the same page, but nonetheless, parents
could I say something too?
Go ahead.
Could I? I just want to say, to bridge both the points you're both making, like King has a lot of pain, and that pain, the saddest thing is that what York did, the saddest thing, instead of what it was supposed to be about, for, of, and by each other and to protect the children. It's supposed to be all about the children. The whole purpose of being isolated from society was to raise the children in the purest state that they could possibly be raised, and not be exposed to the things that were in the so-called belly of the beast. That was the whole purpose of all of this. And it should have been something beautiful. It could have been about that, but instead you have families ravaged because, King, I get it. Like
let me just say this. This is not really coming from a place of pain. This is coming from a place of logic. It's coming from a place of logic. Okay.
No, I understand. I understand. But what I was speaking to was this. Yeah. Instead of you know, like you now you have, and you're not the only child, because, you know, so many children went through what you went through, that have a dysfunctional relationship with their parents. So our families, our Black families that were supposed to be unified and supposed to be better, you know, are now broken and splintered and dysfunctional, and have to try to find a path to repair and forgiveness and acceptance and accountability, you know, that may not be found, and it may forever be broken. And that's the saddest thing out of all of this, because the Black family what this was supposed to represent, what he did with his sickness and his predatory tendencies and all of that, you know, destroyed so many people, destroyed the souls of so many people. And so where you're looking at your parents to have had more sense to do certain things, they didn't have it. They didn't have it because they were brainwashed. And when people get brainwashed, their minds are gone. Their minds don't think the same way. Even if they was raised in the world, they don't think the same. They twisted now.
But you know what? Here's the thing. You know what I mean?
Hold on, King. Before you speak, everybody mute your mic when one person is speaking, so y'all don't talk over one another and override the points, because you know everybody got their own view. So in the chat, there's they're saying, hey, let one person finish and go. So
okay,
just mute. King, you say what you say, and then the sisters, you guys do your thing. And of course, don't try to downplay someone else's start, because it's their own personal experience. And so I've sympathized with all of you guys. So
okay, yeah.
All right, yeah. So just mute and then let him go, and then you guys just go in order.
Okay.
All right.
I just lost my train of thought. But
you don't have to. You can pass the mic then if you lost your thought.
and then,
if I pass that mic, I bet you get that thought back.
Yeah, pass the mic.
Because it's related to what they're talking about. So go ahead. Someone can go ahead and then
okay. You gotta mute though, King. Mute while Anna is speaking.
Okay, so another thing that I wanted to discuss as well is like how he, was a con artist who basically lied about everything about him. He lied about his ancestry and his relations to the Al Mahdi family. When he was, his daughter found out that he was not related to the Al Mahdi at all by taking DNA tests and did a whole ancestry test. So he lied about that. He lied about having a degree from the University of Khartoum in Sudan and having a degree in Arabic, when he did not even have his high school diploma because he was taking his GED in jail. So he did not study in the University of Khartoum at all. And it was like everything about this man that he told us and told his followers was a lie. It was like nothing was true about what he said to us about him.
Yeah. What I wanted to add to that again, and I keep going back to this whole accountability thing, in regards to that, the lies and everything else like that.
Yes.
Again, our parents were aware of some of those lies. These adults who came into the community, by the way, they were adults when they came into the community. My parents were in their 20s and 30s when they came, 20s and late 20s, early 30s when they came in the community. They were adults, and they knew this stuff. Like, for example, I talk about how my mom worked in a book, in the office, compiling these books and everything. And, and how they actually did all the research and how they put these books together. And York would give his points and say, I want this in the book. I want this in the book. Look up this, look up that. And they compiled these books and everything. Yet these books were sold to the public and to the followers and presented to them as if these was his own words. These were his own knowledge that was coming from some mystical space or whatever the case may be. Yet they knew this was not true. And they played along with it. They kept it going. For example,
it was all about the money.
People who were at the beginning of the organization of the community when it first started, they knew the brother wasn't from Planet Risk. His family knew he wasn't from Planet Risk, but yet they all
he wasn't born in Sudan.
they all continued on this myth and everything like that. So they played into all this. So this is what I'm talking about, the whole accountability and responsibility part about it, you know, and why I understand there were some people, once they got into it, you know, they got all involved in it. They were afraid to leave and everything else like that. But at some point in time, you got to put on your thinking cap and you say, wait a minute, I know this is not true. I know this is not true. I know he's doing this. I know he's not doing this. He's not what he's saying he is. When do you say, you build the courage up to say, you know what, I can't keep on doing this and keep following this man. I can't live here and do this. You know, I can't keep exposing my children to being abused, and not just sexually abused. There were more than, we talk about all these different aspects of abuse, you know, mental, emotional, physical, you know what I mean? When we were in Brooklyn, I can't describe the amount of physical abuse we endured, and not just, you know, by other adults, you know what I mean? I remember a time when I was about 5 years old. You know, I was in a room of a bunch of kids, and, you know, in the community, we had this sort of, you know, a principle of, you know, one for all for one, mean in the sense that if one child got in trouble, everybody got to beat him. And so I remember when I was about 5 years old, there was something happened. I don't remember what happened, but we were all getting in trouble. And this sister, mean son of, you know, just mean, you know, she came and she lined us all up. And she took a chair and she sat it beside one of those radiators they got in those in Brooklyn and everything like that, those heating radiators. And she took all of us one by one, took our hands and laid it and pressed it up against, pressed it on top of that radiator. And she held it down just enough so that we can cry, we could feel the pain, but not enough so that it wouldn't burn us, because then other parents would see the marks on our hands and everything like that. And we all, she did, all of us, we all stood in the row. You know what I mean? And she did this one by one, burned her. I remember I was like the second person in line when this happened. And I remember after she did it to me, you know, I started crying because I was in pain. But as I looked at all these other kids, maybe about anywhere from 15 to 20 of us, lined up, ready to get the same thing that I just endured, I stopped crying for myself, and I started crying for them, because I could feel the pain that they were about to go through. You know, I saw the hurt on them, the fear and everything else like that. There was more than just, you know, and these parents were aware that this stuff was going on. I remember when I was a kid also in Brooklyn, there was a sister who was watching us and everything. Word got to one of the mothers of the children that she was abusing her child. For whatever reason, I don't think they liked each other. And so she would take it out on her child every now and then. That happened a lot in the community. When sisters didn't like your parents or your mother, whatever the case may be, they treated you very bad. And so this mother got wind that she was abusing her child. She came, knocked on the door. We were all running around, kids and whatever, Pampers or whatever. And the minute the sister opened the door, she got knocked out, fell on the floor. Mother beat her up right in front of her eyes. They were aware that stuff like this was happening. And yes, some of them were isolated. You know, it wasn't like it was happening every single day, but there were a lot of things that were happening, from malnutrition. You know, kids are going to bed hungry, you know, even the parents were. And so when I talk about this whole thing about accountability and the fact that they could have left, I mean, seriously, how much more can you endure? And how can you sit there and watch your children go through all that? It's one thing when you're there by yourself and you don't have no children. You say, you know what? I'm going to chalk it up. I'm going to go through this stuff. I'm committed to this. I'll take all of this nonsense. But when you got children, and mind you, the average family size in the community was about 4 to 5 children. Some had 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Up to 12. Up to 12. So you're talking about, as a mother and a father who's sitting here, and you know this stuff is happening. You hear about this stuff happening to your kids, even if you didn't watch the kids, because not all the parents watched the kids. They had assigned duties and everything in their role in the community. But when you see it, when does it click into you, say, wait a minute, I can't put my child through this stuff. Let me get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? Very few did that. Very few did that.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. And you know, I don't have children, but I thought the same thing. I wondered if I had children, I know, you know, I got to a point myself where I started to look around and I was like, why is he letting us go hungry? Why is he letting the kids go hungry? when we run out of food, like it's our fault.
And
like
when
you know,
he had
a lot
all
of
this
stuff
money
going
too.
on. Yeah, like I there were things that when I got older that I, you know, because I moved in when I was 17. There were things that when I got older that I saw that started to make me question. But I always asked myself, I always wondered if I would have been, what I would have done if I had a child and he did that to my child. I think I would have, you know, another sister that I know, she said it took all of her strength not to blow his head off, you know, and she made her way out when she found out what was going on, you know, with her daughter, you know, and it's just something that each person, you know, just like anybody in the world, there's certain people that have a little bit more, maybe they were able to hold on to their mental faculties a little bit more than someone else. But then, you know, everybody that joined this cause joined for different reasons. You know, some people were already not stable. Some people, you know, maybe trying to get away from something. I mean, and then, but generally people really believed in the cause. And when you really believe in a cause like that, you're thinking that everything you're going through is a test that you have to pass, and that this is the best place for your family. Now, I'm not talking about people that, and even people that knew what was happening to their children, in their brainwashed minds, they really still thought, and I this is my belief. I don't know this for a fact because I'm not a parent that went through that, so I don't understand it fully, but I suspect that because I know the power of being brainwashed, you start thinking that you're not even, you abandon your sense of logic of what you know to be logical and what you know to be sensical, or that's not a word, but what you know makes sense, and you start believing the doctrine, that twisted doctrine that he fed everybody, and you start thinking that what you think is right and wrong, because for a minute he went through this thing, York went through this thing, that there's no right and there's no wrong, there's no sin. So when you put that into somebody's mind and you brainwash somebody like that, and it gets into their brain like there's no right and there's no wrong, you start questioning your own sense of what you know is right and wrong. And you start thinking, well, if he's doing it, it must be right. Maybe it's something I don't understand about this. I had a mother tell me, well, maybe it was his culture. And I was like, that's some bullshit, because whose culture is that? What
he was
is
not
that?
from Sudan.
That's what I.
Yeah.
But even still, like you know, no, that's not.
That
like,
was a lie.
No. Yeah, but I'm just trying to like speak to the effect of what brainwashing. Brainwashing is no joke. Your head is on top of your body for a reason. It rules.
I know.
When you screw somebody's mind up, you have them. And sometimes people's minds get so screwed up, they can't ever come back to what they know is right and wrong, or what they know makes sense. And that's, I'm just trying to speak to that because it's real. You have people real. That really cannot associate facts and logic anymore. They used to at one point in their lives, but they no longer can. They no longer can.
And I agree with you on that. I agree with you totally on that. But here's what I have to say in regards to some people. For example, some people who did leave and who excommunicated themselves from the community, is that those individuals realized that they had made a mistake. But yet, again, I still address them because it's like, okay, well, you see that you made a mistake. You see that you were brainwashed. Now you've come to some senses. Okay, how about you get out here and start talking in defense of these children who was abused now? Now that you've come to your senses, you see what I'm saying? So it's not a matter of attacking everybody, because I understand the whole brainwashing concept. People lose their minds and they do all types of stuff they wouldn't normally do. I get that part. But there are a lot of people who did leave the community, who are no longer associated with it, who said, look, I made the worst mistake ever. Speak up now. You have the opportunity to speak up and defend a lot of these children and us who are coming out here and sharing our stories, but yet we're getting so much backlash. People are calling us demon devils, black devils, and all this other stuff because we're telling them we're expressing about, you know, the
telling
fact
the
that we
truth.
were molested and
Yes.
raped. And here's what I say to those people, because I think what's happened in all of this, particularly with individuals like Tariq Noel and so many others, you know, I think what these people who are looking from the outside in on this issue, the whole topic, is that they lose that sense of sympathy and empathy because they're looking at us now as adults. You know, it's a different emotional response when you hear about a child being molested versus you're looking at this adult now, you know, you're telling them, hey, I was molested. Because I think the disconnect is they're not putting this into context and say, hey, look, we were children when this happened to us. Don't look at me now as a 30-something-year-old man and say, I can't really empathize for you or sympathize for you. Put it into context. We were children. Some of us were, 7, 8 years old, and there were even some younger, were 6 and 5 years old. You know what I mean? And so you got to put this into context when you're hearing this discussion and you're hearing these people coming out this telling their stories, even though they're grown adults now, we were children when this happened to us. You know?
I don't see how somebody couldn't put it in perspective though, King, honestly.
Trust me, I've come across
but I've
people
seen it.
who,
I've seen me too.
They're like, what the hell? And I was arguing with it, and I was stupid for
calling y'all
arguing with this person,
promiscuous.
but,
that was just
person,
ridiculous. Yeah.
This guy on Facebook, I commented on something on Facebook in relation to York and the molestation case. And, he came up to me and said some dumb stuff like, why didn't you call the police? First of all, I said, wait a minute. Number one, I said, you weren't in the community. Because if you were, you wouldn't even say no mess like that.
What
children
phone?
talking about, you're telling children 7 years old who don't even know what the outside world is like. First of all, I had no concept of a police or the number 911. To me,
even if you did try to call, people were in your mouth and looking at you while you were talking because it was a bunch of people in the office.
And even at that age, I didn't have access to the phone. The kids didn't have access to the phone until 7, 8 years old. The adults were the ones using the phones. But anyway, my concept of authority was the brothers who were patrolling, who were so-called protecting us with these guns and rifles and everything. They were the authority to me. I had no concept of a police officer or cops
Half of them probably
or
was
anything like that.
Half of them probably was Mr. York's concubines too.
Well, I don't know about all that, but
no, I know about all that.
Yeah. What I want to do is I want to go and turn to Anna because we would come down to pick up products to take back to the stores to push that misinformation that he was teaching, and because you were so young and you were working, what was life like having to work all those hours, not be financially compensated, in addition having a lack of nutrition? So with all the work you were doing, you were not getting paid, nor were you eating properly. I mean,
it was.
Yeah, what was it like? What was it like?
I mean, it was depressing. That's what it was like. I mean, it was it was times when you were hungry. A lot of us were very skinny, and it's like you were working from sun up to sundown. So it took away your childhood. It took away your time where you're supposed to be in school learning. And supposedly they had the pyramid school, but it's like we wasn't really learning in there either. Because at one point people were going in there for a little bit, but it was really just a dusty shed that they had, put little chairs or whatever, but it was like all this dust on the floor. And then at one point it was like, stop going in there, too. So everybody was working and wasn't getting paid and, didn't get any lunch breaks or anything like that. So it was like all you were doing, packing incense or putting labels on shampoos or whatever, or packing soaps and whatever else, or putting them in boxes. But not only that, but besides working as a minor and not going to school and not getting a proper education, it was also a sense of like your childhood was taken away, but also your sense of your identity and who you were. Because a lot of people forget too, and this is included in the mind games that he did and the manipulation and control. Everyone had to cut their hair. The women had to cut their hair, wear a little braid on the side. Everyone had to wear black. So that take away from your identity of who you are. And it's like, you had to be like everybody else. And I'm like, okay, why do we have to wear all black? And why do we have to cut our hair? as, you know, girls. Like, what was that about? You know, it was just crazy. And a lot of the children that were on there and that grew up, and by the time they left the community, they had to either get their GED or get their high school diploma or whatever, so they can finish their education and go on and, you know, go to college or whatever else they wanted to do, because we were not getting a proper education on the land. Even though he had the money, we could have all went to a private school, but we didn't get that because he was selfish with his money, and he did, you know, whatever he wanted to do with his money. Who knows? I don't know. But even with the I remember one time he donated money to like a track team in Macon or something like that, and I was like, okay, half the kids on the land don't even have anything, not even his own biological kids. You know, some of them didn't even have their personal things that they needed, you know, clothes, shoes, whatever, education, you know, healthcare, even braces. So it's like you had to put in a request for things that you needed because you did not have the personal things you needed, like soap, toilet tissue, personal needs, toothbrush, deodorant, you know, whatever else you needed. You had to put in a paper request because you didn't have the finances to get it yourself. Sometimes it would get approved, sometimes it wouldn't. You know, we didn't have like vitamins that we needed. It was a bunch of things. That's what I'm saying. These are the things that people don't talk about, included in the, you know, what happened in the community. It wasn't only the molestation. It was so much more and so many other things that happened besides only the molestation. And then some of the girls, you know, they were looking real pale and, you know, real skinny because of like lack of nutrients. Even some of the adults were, you know, very skinny and small because of lack of nutrients and protein and a proper diet and, you know, not getting proper health, you know, going to the hospital, getting checked up and just a bunch of stuff.
Wow. That's heavy.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
With the last comment you just made in reference to the lack of nutrition and eating, was he using food as a caviar to molest?
I don't know because the thing is, you know, it's like he had food in his house, but what he would do is like when you know, like some of the young girls or young boys or whoever used to hang around him, he used to have it where you can eat all the snacks and junk food that you wanted. You know, you can have all the ice cream that you wanted. You can have all the snacks and junk food.
Yeah,
you know,
that
he was allowed
that's
to
true.
watch, you know, movies and stuff like that. So
he used a
but
lot
it
of
was
junk food
only-
and sweets and stuff. Yeah.
Yes, it was only in his house, though. We didn't have those in our house because it was very proportioned and it was a lot of children in one house. So a lot of times the food would run out fast. So you didn't have all that food to, you know, feed everybody like that.
It was a little bit different upstate. Food, I wouldn't say in abundance, but in contrast to perhaps Georgia or even Brooklyn, we had a little bit more.
Yes.
There were still the parents still starved sometimes every now and then because the children were first, with the exception of him. You know, he had whatever he wanted. But when it came down to eating and things of that nature, the children always ate first, and then the parents would have whatever was remaining. There were times where parents, you know, sometimes starved because maybe it wasn't enough after all the children ate and everything else like that. But in contrast to Brooklyn and perhaps Georgia, we had a little bit more food. And so food was never used, but again, candies, popcorn and things of that nature was always used as an enticing thing to sort of bring you to his house. Because you knew that once you went to his house, you know, you could have all the candy you wanted. You could have all the treats you wanted. You could watch whatever movie you wanted, you know, and he just pretty much let you do whatever, you know.
And he was even giving minors alcohol too.
So based on y'all's daily routines, was that a work towards a particular hierarchy in the group, or it was just basically the activity of the day?
It was basically like what people did on a regular that lived up there. It's like, you know, you woke up and everyone had their own little jobs that they did. And, you know, you did whatever job that, you know, you were to do. I mean, like, you know, some of the kids, they did play in the playground and stuff like that. But it's like if you were a teenager and, you know, up to an adult, you basically had like a job that you did and you was basically in the office all day. And sometimes you might have went out here and there to eat, or if you wanted to, you know, to take a trip, you know, to Disney or whatever, once in a blue, he would have a group that he would take there. But basically it was like all you were doing was working. Yeah.
And Monica,
you couldn't leave. Huh?
I'm sorry, Monica, to add to her point, let me just say this, because upstate, it was a little bit different as well. We didn't work as children. We pretty much ran around and played for the most part. But the difference, and perhaps the reason why, is because you got to remember, when we were upstate, we had parents living on the land with us. In Georgia, according to, you know, Anna and so many other people, the parents were not on the land with them. And so
some people's parents were on the land.
Some people, but majority of them, we probably had the ratio of children to parents were probably more upstate, and therefore the parents did the work up there. Whereas we ran around and played versus down in Georgia, you know, he put all the kids and the teenagers to work.
And they were not getting paid, and, you know, no health insurance, no nothing, no breaks. So it was like definitely against, you know, work. Basically, you're just violating all type of labor laws, you know, not only with minors, but also with adults too. So you're not supposed to have someone in the office from sun up to sundown, just working to death. Like, that's not what you're supposed to do. And not getting paid for the job that they're doing. You're not getting vacation. You're not getting sick days. You don't have no health insurance, nothing. You don't get no lunch breaks. Like, no. And I mean, I didn't even know that wasn't normal until when I came out into the world and I had got my first job, and I was like, oh, I have to clock in, you know, oh, I get paid for the work. I didn't even know.
Wow. Do you think the reason you guys don't have any kids, well, I think 2 don't have kids, is because of the trauma?
I do want to have a child one day, just not right now.
No, for me, that's not the reason. No.
I'm not able to have children because of not York, but a guy that I married before him, you know. But
I think that that touches on something, because certain individuals who contracted something, I'm not going to get into it too deep, but as a result, and this is going to be a question that I'm going to bring up, as a result of not having proper medical attention, it caused them to not be able to. And that brings me to a question for Anna. Because you had, I think it was Dr. Bright or Dr. Thompson who lived on the property.
Don't be asking me no question that.
Oh, no, I'm not going to ask you anything. Okay. Of course. No, what I was asking is, were they, as physicians, were they available for anybody?
They were available. Okay, the only time I remember Dr. Thompson coming up there was probably to check on Mr. York here and there. I don't ever remember him checking on any of the kids for anything.
Really?
Yeah. I don't remember him checking on any of the kids. And I don't remember. And I mean, I'm not even sure what kind of doctor he was or if he was certified, to be honest, but now, I don't remember him checking on any of the kids.
He was in DC, because I remember him coming to our classes on Rhode Island Avenue. But next thing I know, he was sent down to Georgia, and by he being from what I was told, because I don't have any evidence that
obviously he wasn't coming up there doing what he was supposed to be doing, if you know.
And that's
Mr.
telling.
York, you know,
that is
was
very
having
telling.
all the health problems that he had going on. I don't know what kind of doctor he was and what job he was actually doing.
And
the kids should have been getting checked on as well, and getting proper nutrition and vitamins and whatever else they needed, and eating 3 meals a day, and you know, so on.
So you being there, you saw, you already know of him, and from what you have observed, he wasn't performing any type of medical evaluations or recommending that you get, because from what I know from reading the testimony from the trial, people weren't even going to the doctor.
No, nobody was going to the doctor at all. And they weren't going to the dentist, none of that.
Maybe the emergency room if it was something like whatever, but sometimes not that either.
Yeah, and again, this is the same thing that was going on upstate in Brooklyn too. You know, we didn't go to the doctors either. I remember being a kid in Brooklyn and I got the mumps and everything. The only time you really went to the hospital or something was there was some sort of emergency or a serious infection of some sort.
Exactly.
But you never really.
It was like a bad thing to go to the doctor.
Yeah,
you know?
It had to be very, very serious to the point where if we didn't get some sort of medical attention, there could be some sort of problem in terms of, attention being brought in the community or whatever the case. Yeah, child services or whatever the case may be. So if it wasn't, life-threatening or something that was very serious, we generally didn't go to the hospital. You know, your mother and other women were kind of like the nurses. You know, they nursed you to health. And for me,
go ahead. I'll say it after you do.
Upstate, it was fortunate that I don't remember any incident where anybody got any sick really bad. As far as any STDs relating to York, I don't think he had none at that time because I'm sure some of us would have caught it. But we didn't get any sort of medical attention either. You know, it was just anything severe or life-threatening. That's when you were sent to the hospital.
And then too, I was saying, maybe if some of the children did go to the doctor, then it would have been found out that he was molesting some of the boys and some of the girls. And it's like a lot of people is like, oh, how could it have went on for so long? It could have went on for so long because you have to realize we were not in school, so you didn't have teachers to report it,
Yeah.
And you didn't. It's like he had so secluded and isolated. Who were you
even from your own parents? Sometimes,
yes, you would get in trouble for talking to your parents sometimes. And it's like, who were you going to go tell? You couldn't tell a teacher. You couldn't tell, social worker. You couldn't tell the police because you're isolated on this one land. You're secluded on this one land. You're not in school. You're not out in the public like that where you can talk to all these different people and get help. You're not going to the doctor like that. So it's like, even if something was going on, so that's how he was able to carry it on. And then with the silence, people being quiet about it for so long and parents not speaking up if they did suspect something was going on. And that's what continued. And he molested people from the Ansar Law community all the way to Jezza Abba, all the way to Edenton, Georgia. And I feel like as well that the sheriff of that town needs to be held accountable. And so does DFACS, because if Pauline sent a letter out to DFACS as well as the sheriff, how come it took 4 to 5 years later for anything to be done? He was marching up there and going up there for building permits and building violation, but I didn't see him not one time marching up there with DFACS to check on those kids. Nobody.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a serious point because that's another element that needs to be over time. It needs to be pulled out as well because they played a role in the neglect.
Exactly. And they continued to be silent because they had the letters, saying that, and they knew that it was underage girls getting pregnant by Mr. York and going to the hospital. And you see that going on and you're not saying anything. And DFACS they didn't say anything either. So it's like, y'all just as held accountable as the parents who knew and everybody else if y'all are silent about it. Because DFACS didn't do nothing. No, so did the sheriff. He didn't do anything. So I was like, you didn't march up there like you marched up there to put the padlocks on the building, none of that. He came up there a few times, and not once did I see him come up there with DFACS and say, let me check on these kids and go in these houses and check on them. And that's why I say it was more of a power struggle between him and Mr. York with the zoning violation and all that and the threats that he was putting against them when he was making those articles and giving it to the sheriff and the people who worked in the county. So it was more of a power struggle between Mr. York and Sills. And I'm like, and then y'all want to act like y'all really cared about the children when y'all didn't give a fuck about the kids at all. It was basically about y'all and y'all ego. And Sills wanted to play Savior now. Like, oh yes, and I brought him down 4 or 5 years later. Like really, when more kids got molested,
for 4 and 5 years more.
Yes. Yeah. Like, oh, thank you a lot. You really did a great job.
Damn.
So I want to understand the brainwash piece a little bit more in reference to going back to daily activities and routines. You all did y'all have like, was it like group sessions? Was it like training sessions where you're learning a particular way? Like, so for example, right? If you go to, okay.
It wasn't no training going on, and it wasn't a group session. It was basically like, you work here in this department, you work there in that department, and you just, do the work. It wasn't no training done.
The brainwashing happened from reading the books, and then going to the classes. That happened first.
Okay, yeah,
and
that's what I'm asking.
The reason you go. Yeah,
and not only that.
So classes. I call it training. You call it classes.
Oh,
so the classes.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. Like, what training? I'm thinking you're talking about job.
I'm sorry. I'm military. I'm military. We call classes training. Sorry. So the classes were they like, okay, so you didn't go to like a regular grade school type deal, but you had classes on books that York have written. So I suspect it was like intro. It was on religious topics, or
and you have to understand too. Okay, I'm gonna say
that's what I'm trying to. That's what I'm trying to understand. Because I think when people try to get a feel for like, okay, why did they stay again? And when we hear brainwash, we like, okay, so what exactly? How? I mean, like how? Like people say military people are brainwashed, and I'll say, well, no, we wasn't.
Okay. So how he did his brainwashing is that he was a talker. He talked a lot. So it's like when you were around him, he was always talking, and that was his form of brainwashing that he did. When he was telling people, y'all family don't care about y'all, this and that. Oh, and I remember him saying one time, oh yeah, y'all think, y'all gonna go out there and get your degree or whatever, or your high school diploma, and he tried to make it seem like it didn't mean anything to have an education. It's like he wanted people to be so dependent on him, but not having an education, but not knowing how to drive, but not having no, just no job experience, by being cut off from their families. So it's like he wanted people to be so dependent and relying on him that they didn't have nothing. And he would get mad if people try to leave or go out there into the world. And, he talked a lot. So when he always was talking, either he was on his porch, on his patio, or when he was in the office, wherever he was, he always talked a lot. And when he was doing that, that was his indoctrination, when he was doing his brainwashing.
Also, at one point in Brooklyn, we couldn't watch regular TV. You couldn't listen to regular radio. He had his own station. He broadcasted what he wanted everybody to watch and what the information he wanted everybody to be subject to. And it would play all day. You'd hear it, you'd hear different things, or you would see if there was some people had access to television, a lot of people didn't. But if you were, in the back office, he streamed whatever, he just put on whatever programming he wanted to put on. Sometimes it was regular music, but oftentimes it was,
his music,
what we can call secular music, the Ansar to Allah. Exactly. So,
well, a lot of times he used to play, particularly in Jazz Abba, he used to play his music.
Yes, his York music. Exactly.
I used to hear that a lot.
York Productions music, exactly. So, and in terms of the classes I was speaking about, this is what people would come to get information. He used to have classes in Brooklyn on Sundays or Saturdays and Sundays. I'm not sure. I can't remember the day. But people used to, from the public or people who were interested in moving in, would go to class where you could ask questions, and it was the indoctrination of the books. So it was a big thing to be an Ansar. You had to know what you were talking about. So you studied those books like they were like they were something you needed to like memorize, so you could battle anybody at any given point in the Bible and the Quran or whatever, and you would know what you're talking about. So when you ingest all that, that's where the brainwashing occurs. And then it's perpetuated. That's what you teach the children. That's what you teach everybody in there. That's what everybody believes. And then like Anna said, he's a talker. If you were around him, he was talking. He was, and we would think he was dropping gems. He was giving information. He was, getting information from, he used to call himself an avatar. So you would think and then he would get into these weird personality moods where you would think he's getting, you know, possessed by some being from another planet.
Was his mental disorder kicking in.
Yeah, but this is what people used to see. Yeah, people used to see this and they would think that, you know, he's channeling. You know, it had to be, I imagine it would have to be extremely exhausting or truly something wrong for somebody to be able to behave like that, even in an inner circle. You know,
and I mean, it was because he had mental disorders that, you know, was proven.
Yes. So
schizophrenia, bipolar, and whatever else.
Exactly. So when you're already indoctrinated with the doctrine from the books that you read and you studied like they were, you know, the gospel, and then you had, you know, being around the person or not being around the person and just studying the books. This is what you're going off of. This is the information you're going off of.
And he instilled fear in people. He always made it seem like you know, the end of the world was coming.
In the dunya, you go into the world.
Like if you go out there, you know, you're not going to be protected, or bad things are going to happen to you. And you know, he instilled a lot of fear in people.
This man was crazy. I mean, I recall. I'm telling you, the things that he came up with, and these, like, again, these parents, and they believed a lot of this nonsense. I remember a time upstate, one time, we were told by York that a mothership was coming. And I remember everybody on the land upstate was basically running and frantic. They were in chaos. Oh, a mothership is coming. It's finally coming. You know, he told everybody this mothership was supposed to come up and pick up the 144,000, whatever, you know. And I remember it was nighttime. Right. And all the kids are running around. The kids was somewhat scared, but at the same time, they were excited because they wanted to see this. We all wanted to see the mothership and everything else like that. And the parents sitting up here perpetuating this myth, letting us believe that this mothership was coming. Again, talking about the parents playing their role in all of this nonsense, you know. And so what happened?
Some of them really believed it.
Yeah, some of them believed it, and some of them knew it was. Some of them knew it was bullshit. But yet they kept on going. And so what happened was that, you know, the night went by, the next morning, nothing came by. And what York told everybody was that basically we weren't ready. The mothership came by, but we weren't ready, so it went past us. And you know, this bullshit, like all of this nonsense, you know, he used to tell people that, and they believe in these parents walking around here, oh, well, we weren't ready. You know, we weren't.
They probably still waiting for the mothership.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and then stupid stuff like, for example, you know, like Christmas, for instance, he would celebrate the same Christian or, you know, paganist religions such as Christmas, for example, but he would switch in Halloween, but he would just switch the name of them. For example, Christmas, they called Children's Day as opposed to Christmas. And instead of a fat white man in a red coat coming down a chimney, a Santa Claus, they said angels were coming down to bring us gifts. You know, for Halloween, they called that, it wasn't called Halloween, it was called Prophets and Angels Day, where we would dress up as the prophets in the Bible. You know, I remember one time I can't remember if I was Abraham or Noah. I was dressed up as one of them in the Bible, and we would run around on the land, going from house to house, picking up candies and stuff. But we were celebrating these same Christian and paganist religions and everything, these secular religions, but yet they were just changing the name of it. And again, the parents were playing along with all this nonsense. They knew what this stuff was what it really was, but they were playing along with it.
And see, a large part of that, and I don't, not that I'm excusing it, it's just that a lot of people who were really, really into it because they believed in the movement, they were like, okay, this is good for them to celebrate, have our own holidays, you know, around that, so that the children can participate with something when everybody else is celebrating Christmas, everybody else is doing that. Our children can have something to celebrate too. But
well,
again,
why not do it on a different day? Why do it the same day and you just call it by a different name? To coincide
with what they're seeing in, you know, in other areas in school, you know, because, you know, you lack when you don't celebrate the same holidays and you see other kids celebrating something and you want to do that around the same time. That's just my feedback
Well,
on that, but I get
yeah.
what you're saying. I get
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying.
I'm
You
speaking
know,
in the sense
it's
because
just
I
other
never went to
lines.
school, and so I had no other concept of that. So if they
Right,
never even
right.
mentioned the whole, children and angels,
You would never
prophets
know.
and angel day and children,
Yeah.
I would never even know. I
Right,
never even know
right.
Christmas existed. I never even know what the
Exactly.
hell a holiday was. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And so
And
why
exactly.
perpetuate a myth and tell us a lie? It's no difference from what these people out in the outer world were doing when they were
Lying
telling
to
their
their
children
kids.
about Christmas.
That's
You lying
true.
to us and telling us angels are coming down to bring us gifts.
Right, right.
You're
You're right.
not doing anything different.
You're right. You're right.
I think
You're right.
like when you think about this whole thing, and even like Mr. York himself, it's like what makes it so sad about the whole situation is that it was supposed to be like this, pure community and this, mission that he was
Yes.
supposed to be on to save the children. And it's like he literally just like lied about everything about who he was.
Destroyed.
Yes.
Just
It's like he
destroyed.
lied about his
And
ancestry. He
that was
lied
the
about his
facade.
education. He lied about being there to save the children. When you basically like just damaged and like destroyed all the children, and then he still sits there in jail and pretend that he's innocent and that he didn't even do anything, and he never apologized to anybody for the damage and the hurt that he did, not even to his own main wife Kathy's son. I'm like, you haven't apologized for anybody that you damaged,
And that would be a
nothing.
starting point, even though he can't ever make it right. That would be a starting point to say, listen, I have a problem. I'm sorry. Like, even though it can't ever make it right, ever.
But I think that
it could save these children from getting attacked and people from telling the truth, getting attacked by people who think, oh, he could never do anything like that. Protect the ones that you destroyed. At least do that.
They don't know.
Do that.
Yeah.
Exactly. But he
And I
could be the
think-
one to do that, but he won't do it.
I
He could
think
be the
that's
one
the-
to shut it down, but he
I
won't.
think that's the start of bringing closure for a lot of people, particularly the victims, is that, we can sit up here and be like, oh, well, he's sitting in prison for 135 years. And to some people, that just might be enough. I don't care even if it was relating to the child molestation or whatever. At the end of the day, he's sitting in prison for 135 years. But that's not enough for the victims who know that, okay, there is a part of that hasn't been acknowledged,
Addressed.
that we are telling the truth. You know what I mean?
Yes.
For the most part, there are people running around here still thinking we're liars,
Exactly.
still calling us devils and everything like that. And so I think for the beginning process of getting that closure is for number one, for him to come out and just admit that that he did this stuff.
And people
You know what I
need to
mean?
wake up and realize he's not this holy man that they
Right.
think he is.
But he's
a
the one. He's
flawed
the only
man,
one. Right.
You
Right.
know, and it's
He
like
was-
he was just a
Yeah.
con artist, and he wasn't no holy man. He was just a fucked up person, a fucked up pedophile that went and damaged more children, and everybody.
He was no different from any of these other religious leaders who started organization back in the day, like Jim Jones, Father
just trying to
Divine,
make money
Daniel
by lying
Grace.
That's
about.
right.
All of these people, he was the same thing, And the interesting thing about this all is that, when you talk about the inception of all of this, the organization, how it came about, you got to think of the time period. In the late 1960s and 70s, there was a movement even before that where all of these organizations were starting up. Everybody was preying on the hopeful.
They were looking for a savior or a black
the
leader
hopeful,
to look up to.
Individuals who's looking for, to be saved or to be removed from their circumstances. And so, when I think about this and I think of my dad, and I'm kind of revealing a little bit about who he is or whatever, but he came from down Mississippi. He's from the rural South, down in the deep South. And he grew up in a time where racism was apparent and very blunt. He told me a story about one time he was walking to school and he saw a black man hanging in a tree. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so he come from that period where racism was very apparent, being called a nigger daily, and developing this sense of like, who are these white people? And so when he came up north and he heard about York talking all this, the white man is the devil, that's what got him. He was hooked. That's all he needed to hear to join. The white man is the devil, because in his mind, he rationalized that all the corrupt things that these white people were doing and how evil they were, they must be the devil. And that's what captured him. And I believe it may have done the same thing to many other people.
Yeah,
you know,
that's exactly
people
right.
who are looking, you know, are trying to understand what's going on in the world. He had, quote unquote, the answers for it. And that's how he captured them. But
that's
then
exactly
he
right.
held them with all this mythical bullshit that he told them and everything else like that. And all these fake stories and all these misinformation that we're talking about. You know, and again, talking about accountability, the women in particular who worked in those offices, who made those books, knew that a lot of that stuff was not true and a lot of it was plagiarized.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I worked in that department for some time also when I was in Brooklyn. I did proofreading. And when and again, this goes back to the brainwashing. You know, you look at the books and you get the information. Like, he'll bring up a point. He used to have these sessions with us where he would lecture and we would, you know, take notes about what he was talking about. And say he wanted to lecture about this topic and make it a book. So the sisters would, you know, listen to what he was saying. Everybody would dictate or whatever. And he'd make the point that he wanted to make and make sure this is the points that everybody touched on. And then you go research it and you get the information and then you compile it, you write it. Then he looks it over and he's like, yeah, this is whatever. So it was an exchange like that. So you're thinking in your brainwashed mind that he's just adding to this information that already exists. So it's not like...
Did it ever dawn to you in that process to say, well, wait a minute, I'm the one who's really making this book?
Not at all. That's the strange thing. This is why I can speak to brainwashing to a certain extent, because my mind didn't even think that way. I didn't even think that way. And I know that the rest of the sisters in there, well, a lot of them, there could be some that didn't, because I don't know what was on their mind. But I know when we would work on something, and I didn't work long on that type of thing, but I was in there for a minute I was exposed to that. And I saw how the process was. And you're thinking, you feel gassed up. You feel like I'm part of the mission. I'm part of spreading the word and the doctrine straight from the Avatar, from Malachi, from blah, blah. You know, you think you're on a mission. You're not even thinking on the level of, wait a minute. So, because you're hearing information out of his mouth that I'm sure he heard from somewhere, okay, that we didn't hear from because he watched regular TV. You know what I'm saying? And some of us watched TV with him when we were there, but I'm sure he watched stuff like Discovery Channel and stuff that I watch now. And I'm like, wait a minute, Shambhala? Okay, I remember him talking about that. But here, there's a book, a whole book out, and a whole, you know, documentary about this that was out a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? But you don't, these things don't occur to a brainwashed mind. They just don't, because you're all up in the mix with the illusion. Like you all up in it. Your mind is caught up in its sense of imagination, and it just weaves, it believes what it's hearing. And you don't even think like that. You think you're helping with the mission. You don't think, oh, well, this book already existed. He's speaking to this, but you thinking he's adding some extra knowledge on top of that. That's what you're thinking.
Yeah, and to your credit and to the sisters' credit, I do understand, because you're talking about a period of time, number one, where the internet was not around, you know, and so information was not as easily accessible. Sure, you can go to the library and find things, but again, we didn't have access to the library.
Exactly.
So I get that part. But when you're actually talking about the process and you're like, you seeing that you're doing all the work. Number one thing that trips me out a lot of time when people refer to, and I think, Anna, you said it one time, but I don't think you meant it in that sense. You said, you know, he wasn't sharing his money. It wasn't his money. All those people worked and gave that money. You know, that was their
it was
money.
our money.
You know what I mean? All those people contributed through the welfare system and through peddling and through all other different types of activities.
Right.
They worked their ass off. You know, meanwhile, he's just sitting around, you know, coming up with ideas and everything and plagiarizing all of it and traveling different places and everything, you know, and abusing their children while they're working.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so
giving everything.
Absolutely. You know, and I don't think they realize, and that's the thing that I'm talking about. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Did anyone stop to think and say, well, wait a minute, we're doing all of this. We're writing and compiling the books. We're making all the damn money. We're the ones raising the children, because he ain't raised a single child, not even none of his. He didn't watch a single child. We're doing all of this stuff. You know,
I don't think that was. I think that was an after. You know how they say 2020. You know, your hindsight is 2020 vision.
Yeah.
That you don't when you in it. And again, I wasn't in everybody's mind, so I don't know every sister that maybe there was a sister here and there that was like, wait, hold up. But for the most part, you know, when you're part of a collective like that, and again, remember the way that he was able to gas people up. Yeah. With just the recognition and the accolades of, oh, you know, this is you know, you're working on this mission, you know, for the lamb, for the, you know, you're thinking, you're not even thinking, your mind is so far from what's really going on. It's just completely removed from it and in another reality. And we all know how the brain, the mind is a very powerful thing. And when somebody controls that, it's a wrap. It can be a wrap unless somehow, some way, by some thread of a chance, you're able to really get to that point where you rationalize, or something happens where it makes you, you know, it takes you back from and goes, wait a minute. You know, but not everybody was able. I'm so grateful that you know, that some of us were able to do that.
You know, one of the things that I another reason why I'm so adamant and I guess serious about this is that, you know, I've watched my mom through her process, through the transition and everything else like that. And one thing, despite the fact that I'm still upset with her on so many other levels, I do commend her, because my mother was one of those women who tried to get away. She attempted to escape at least 3 times. I remember when we were in Brooklyn, she grabbed all 5 of her children, walked off of that from behind the gates, and we were up at the train station. She was ready to go. Somebody discovered that she left. They got her and brought her back. When we were upstate, she somehow got in contact with her family. She was plotting a getaway to have somebody come up there and she meet them somewhere and she get the hell out of there. She attempted that several times, you know. So I know just from that, her experience in that and seeing that there were other women as well who did the same, who wanted to do the same thing.
Oh yeah, it was.
Maybe not attempted. So when you think about that, you're like, okay, well, these women in particular know something's wrong. They got something going on that they're figuring something out. You know, and I understand them. A lot of people weren't like that. You know, and I can empathize. But it just bothers me to understand that, you know, especially when it comes to your child.
Your children.
Because in the sense that you are their creator.
Yes.
Your parents are your creator. They are supposed to be your protector at every level, on every level, you know. And if you can't protect your child, that is, to me, the greatest sin in the world. When you are incapable of protecting your child, or not necessarily incapable, when you choose not to protect your child.
Yes,
that is the worst thing that you can do.
I agree with you. This is the other thing I'll add to that, though, King. In Brooklyn, which was the setup, and I thought about this again after the fact, but when everybody moved in there, you had the children separated. Everyone was separated. The family unit was separated. Again, you know, only the top peddlers. Again, why? This is
why the only person that would know that was Mr. York.
Yeah,
you can blame Mr.
Agree
York.
to it.
Again,
no.
King, stop trying to act like it was so easy to be like, oh yeah, you can, you know, blame whatever you're saying, because it's like you're making it seem like
making it seem like it's so easy. What I'm doing is placing accountability. And at the
end
of the day,
are, but it's like you have to understand.
You have to ask yourself. A lot of our parents didn't come from that background. They didn't. This was all new.
But like Ruby said,
let me finish my point.
Okay, let me talk real quick, because I was talking before you. Like Ruby said, you have to understand that a lot of them were also brainwashed.
I understand
and that comes into play.
I'm getting before that. Okay, a lot of our parents, when they came in the community, they were not exposed to this kind of lifestyle. They came from different lifestyle. This was all brand new to them. So the fact that they came into this environment and they realized this setup, and no one was like, oh, wait a minute, this ain't right. Your children, you're over here and your children in another damn state or another city. Come on.
Let me speak to that just for a second. I get what you're saying.
Did you ever ask your mom?
This is before absolutely. But I already told you at the beginning of the thing, every time I try to talk to my mom, she changed the subject.
It's
and
painful
I can't have that
for her.
Conversation with her.
Yeah,
so what I'm saying is that you don't separate your child like that, your children like that. You don't allow your child to be in another city or state when you're here and you don't know what the hell is going on with them.
This is
even
absolutely
before all
correct.
the brainwash.
But when you move in, King, when your parents moved in, they were already there. They were already brainwashed.
No, they weren't because all of our children were born in the community. They were not.
But I'm saying they moved in because they were brainwashed. They moved in because they were already hooked, line, and sinker with the doctrine.
They were not.
You have to understand.
They converted though, King, right? They converted and they moved in, right?
Listen. It wasn't. You don't get brainwashed. There's a sense of being manipulated into joining something, but at that point you're not brainwashed. Once you're in it, for most of the people,
you obviously must not understand like what it is to be in a cult and how people.
No, but because he was born
what are you
into
talking
this.
about? I was in it.
You were in it, but when did you leave? When did you leave Jess Appa?
It doesn't matter. I was born and raised in it. It doesn't matter. I was 9 years old. It does not.
You left when you were 9, right?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, so some people were in there since they were toddlers all the way until 19.
I was born in it. I wasn't a toddler.
Some of the parents, but you left at 9 years old. I'm saying it was some children that were in there a lot longer, and it was parents that were in there a lot longer. And obviously, as you can see, this man had a lot of control over a lot of people. It wasn't only our parents. Did you see how big the organization was and how much control he had over them?
And that's the
hold on. I got a question real quick.
Go ahead.
I want to interject because I'm hearing what you're saying, King. I hear what you're saying, Anna, but from the outside looking in, this is how it looked to me, is that he controlled, I'm Sean, he controlled all of the minds of everyone that he encountered. And like, I believe it may be in Ruby or you, Anna, that said that people were indoctrinated. Now, in order to even get near that land, he would have had to have present himself to you in a way that people held him in high regard. And from that moment forward, it was easy to fall in love with him because he talked crazy about other doctrines and situations that led to whatever he started to formulate. Now, the question that I actually have is pertaining to, y'all talked about the diet, you talked about how I was on the land, you talked about your personal experiences and encounters. King is real passionate about the parents. There's some personal situations that took forth. Ruby was real close to York as well. So I respect every last one of you guys' experiences. But as far as communicating, you said communication was limited and it was conduced down to certain things. Now, the only way that he could do that, based on the other people that have came on the platform and have interviewed about their experiences, was the fact that he actually separated the women and children and the men from one another on the compounds. But in all of you guys' experiences with him personally, do you think that he intentionally did some of the things that he did out of his own ignorance, or his ability to know that he had that power over you?
What do you mean, like?
What I mean by, like, to say, for instance, you guys spoke to him not wanting to speak to you or not speaking to you for a certain amount of time. And then when he deemed it necessary to speak to you, then he would speak to you again. Like, was that supposed to, like, truly hurt your feelings And
that was a part of his mind games and his manipulation tactics that he used.
Okay.
I think in some regards, yes. To answer your question, yes, that was one of the things that he did. But again, here's what I always go back to: one man does not run an organization. Okay, it takes a network of people to run an organization. See, there you go, Anna. Please don't do that, because I don't do that to you. Okay, my point is that it takes a network of people to run an organization. Don't no one man have control over thousands of people like that, especially when you're talking about the community was broken up into different satellites, into cities, and all over up and down the East Coast, the Northeast, in Washington, D.C., in Philadelphia, where many of them York have never even visited. He never even went to those communities. And those people had never had any interaction with him. So
King, can I speak to that when you finish?
Would you agree that they were passionate? But would you agree that those networks of people that he communicated with on the daily were very passionate about Dr. York? Because I've heard a person come on the platform when Brother Anpu was on here, and he was giving his illustrations about the court case, the personal situations, and the things that he experienced on the land. And that brother wanted to challenge everything, and he never met York a day in his life.
Interesting.
That's the point. That's the point. The brother Sean and King, what I wanted to speak to, you'll find that there's people, the people who've never met York, who would never even have the opportunity to meet him a day in their life. Those are the most strongest, most brainwashed people you'll ever want to meet. And it's because of the books. They're already brainwashed, King. They're already brainwashed. It's like how people follow the Pope. It's like people all globally. You got Catholics who look at the Pope like he's like. I mean, if they see the Pope, they fainting and crying and screaming and and think he can create miracles for them. That's the effect that York had on everybody that follows him. He still has that effect on people that will never ever lay eyes on him or never be in his presence. Strong influence because of what the books have done to their mind.
But here's my question: if for those individuals who've never met him and who have never had any relationship with him, is the effect really coming from York, or is it coming from other people who are speaking on his behalf? Because mind you, there were a lot of people who went out there to recruit, and they spoke on York's behalf. So my point that I'm making is that their motivation or their inspiration to join the community was not always necessarily as a result of York or his influence or his charisma.
But it was his charisma being passed on to other people.
Perpetuated this idea of York
from him.
Right.
From
so
the
I want to agree with I think that was Sister Ruby that was actually speaking. Yes. And I'm gonna give you an example, King, on how he doesn't have to necessarily speak to you directly to have an influence, right? So let's say, for instance, these people act like missionaries in the community. And in order to act like a missionary in the community, you got to sell people on a belief. That belief had to be conjured up by someone who was plotting from the beginning to push the agenda. Now, the agenda was to get you out of everything else and into what the organization was focused on, right? Now, remember, you guys have the experience in this, but I'm saying from the outside looking in and based on what other people have testified to, their experiences were with this particular organization. Most of the people we've talked to other children of Dr. York's who have the same gripes as many people come in on the panel and have, and based on his presence, meaning that those missionaries that were doing the actual work would go out there and say, look, read this book. Like Sister Ruby kept saying, read this book. They pass these books out. Then guess what happens? He's got a lecture. He's got the alien theme music going. He's telling you all of this. He's romanticizing pseudoisms, and he's conjuring them up as his, and I'm making quote, his holy words. And He's selling these people. I've listened to I listened to 10 minutes of him, and then it got so crazy to me that I was like, I can't do this. So I was listening to him, and he was talking, and he was, talking about how he was the Jesus, how he was this, that, and the third, and he was going on and on and on and on. And I'm like, this is how you rope people in. You send the missionary out. The missionary introduces York to you. They give you this book. Now you're reading these things. Now you're like, oh, this is what Christianity stole all of this stuff from. Then you start feeling like you didn't left Christianity for a reason, because this is what you originally was supposed to have. So now you double indoctrinated. And then on top of that, they put him in front of you, and you hear one of his lectures, and he is talking about all these things that got you like all in love with him. So I think Danny's in the chat right now talking about Brooklyn Magic. So when that happens, and when that happens, to Ruby's point and to Anna's point, you're locked in, bro. And I understand it. And the best way to get anyone locked into a cult is to persuade, influence, and misguide the woman.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
she is going to teach the babies.
That's
and
it.
that is what he seems to be, what he perfected in his lifetime, was the fact that he knew that he needed to manipulate the women. And the best way for him to do that was to go head first at what he could play on those women, and then start separating them, start having these, I think Ruby said it best, and I think Anna said it best, women, the other women couldn't talk to the other women. So now he has he has set everybody apart in secrecy. So now you can't even elaborate on anything. I think Anna said that she got in trouble a couple of times, I believe.
Yeah.
And all these things start happening. So it's all coming together based on your experiences that I'm
But not
hearing.
only was he able to control and manipulate the women, he was able to control and manipulate the men too. And that's why I'm like, people don't understand, because it wasn't only us, that little bit on the land that was being controlled and manipulated. He had, if you saw his followers, it was a bunch of followers, in different states, in different countries.
Yeah.
So it's like he was able to control and manipulate and influence a lot of people. And that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And it's like also when you understand how a person that is a cult leader and the control that he has over the people in the cult, it's like it's so much deeper than you saying, oh, this person should have did that and they should have left, or they should have did that. It's not that easy.
Yeah, it's
so
hard
easy
it's
for
hard
you
to
to
do
say
that.
that. Yes,
Okay.
it's so much
It's like a
harder.
relationship. It's hard to break up
like
with
a
somebody
toxic
you've been with for 10
relationship or
years.
abusive
Right.
What's
relationship.
the
It's so much
ultimate-
easier to say they should have did this and they should have did that. And,
Can I say something
but
real
it's
quick?
like it's not
What's
that
the
easy.
Was the
Can I say something real
ultimate?
quick?
Was the
Can I say-
ultimate? Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say the one thing real quick. I hear you, all of y'all loud and clear, and I agree with you. When I mentioned the whole accountability thing, I'm not coming at it from a perspective of why didn't you leave. When I say accountability, I'm talking about the
I
parents.
know
that
you're
are
talking
out
about the parents.
Hold on. But here's what I'm saying. I'm talking about now. I'm not talking about back then. I can't do anything about back then. I'm talking about parents now. Let's take accountability for what happened and for the decision they made, and say, you know what? We made a
Right.
mistake. Let's
Right.
let's have a conversation now. Let's start telling the truth about what really happened. I'm not talking about what they should have, could have, would have done. I'm
Yeah.
talking
Right.
about what they need to do now. So I
Right.
get what you're saying, and don't get me wrong. I'm not disagreeing with you all. But I think what I was saying was taken out of context. I'm not referring to what they should have done. I understand they were brainwashed. I get it. I saw it. I know it. I lived it. But I'm saying now, for those individuals who realize that they were brainwashed, who've come to their senses, let's speak up.
They should
Stand
be
Get
out
out
there
here
talking about
and
it
let's
now.
talk about it.
Right.
And I mean, I
That's
do
what I'm
agree.
saying.
There should
Yeah.
have been accountability made on the land and in Bushwick and Jesse Abbott when that stuff was going on too. An
Yeah.
adult should have spoken up then, as well. And in
Right.
that way, it wouldn't have been continuing generations from the Ansar community to Jesse Abbott
Right.
to Tamaray. It shouldn't have continued for like 3 generations later, from the 80s all the way
Right.
to the 90s.
We're
There's
talking
no
about
reason why it should have
We're
been
talking
What
about a
was
continuing that
20-year
long.
span.
Right.
Yeah.
What was the ultimate? Well, I could believe that it lasts that long, because you can look at other religions and see how that works. That's an easy one. But what was the ultimate belief? What was the ultimate belief in reference to buying into the charismatic? Because I hear some people say he had, because he was the movement and he acted on it. And when I listened to a lot of, I guess, so to speak, quote unquote, conscious perspective, it's getting into a place where you can create a community where your people can live and and be free of, I guess, the wolves on the outside, right? And so what was it? What was the ultimate belief or the ultimate destiny of the land Tamari? Because it was a beautiful place and looks like it was created for something. And then what was the ultimate? Yeah, what was the ultimate
let me
belief?
answer
Because I believe that belief.
Let me answer the question for you.
What, can you let me finish the comment? The belief. And the reason I said it is because from the belief aspect of it, like I said, we can see in other religions on how that works. I mean, you have people, something as small as some of the little different Christian sects or any other sect, and you can look at them and be like, wow, why would you stay over there? But anyways, they stay, right? So from the belief aspect, I can see it. But what I want to know is, what was the ultimate whole belief deal, and what was the ultimate goal of Dr. York? Because he do have a lot of followers in all different places, and even with him being locked up, these people are die hard. So I know what Christians believe. I know what NOI, Muslims and Hindu and Confucians and all of them. But what I gather from most people is that he spoke on all of them. So what was the ultimate goal? I don't understand.
I mean, I think, to be honest, he's the only one that can answer that, because it was at first we were Muslim, Muslims, and then it went from that to Nubian, and then it went from Nubian to being cowboys, and then cowboys to believing in extraterrestrials. I'm like, I have no idea what the ultimate goal, what he was trying to do. Like, I have no idea. It was just a bunch of everything mixed in one.
So yeah, someone in the chat said the mothership and being of the 144,000.
I don't know. The mothership must have came a lot, because I haven't seen it
yet. Yeah, that's the okay. That was the hook, because a lot of us that were on the outside, the hook was that here's a sanctuary. You move into the tabernacle of the Most High. You are going to be the ones to be protected, and in the process, you're living prophecy, because based on the book of Revelation, those gowned in white will be the ones that are to be, raptured. And part of the rapture would be that there would be a ship that would descend out of the heavens. And he backed that with the book of Revelation, chapter 21, I think it is, where it talks about a new heaven and a new earth coming down out of heaven. And those little blue Revelation books were supposed to be illustrations of the text from the Bible, where it gives you some type of implication that there are windows that are made of crystals and fine materials on earth, and then it refers to it as a crystal city. So he set as the hook when people would come to class is that you need to move into the tabernacle of the Most High, because this is going to be your only sanctuary, and it's going to be the children who are going to be our salvation, because they're going to be taken up into the ship for 1,000 years or one day, and then come back, and they will be the ones who are going to be our saviors. And so by doing so, he being the one, Michael, Melchizedek, or any other name of supposed to be the big man up at the top, who is supposed to be the one to bring in the real Messiah, because his whole game was that he was supposed to be the forerunner for the real Messiah. You see, he was supposed to be the one to set it up so that when the Messiah comes, or Jesus, whoever is supposed to come, his job is to gather the 144,000. And those children are supposed to be separated from society and not be partakers of the delicacies of the harlot, which is, again, a biblical quote that he used. You see?
I don't know anything about that. But
yeah, I know that was the Antichrist where we were coming from. That was Ansar doctrine. And that was Nuwaubian doctrine. Now later on, he altered it by saying that all of y'all, meaning who's inside, are going to be part of the 144,000, because time showed that prophecy couldn't possibly have worked.
Right.
I don't know. I think everything that he was talking about was just a bunch of lies, just to make money off of the followers that he had. Because as you can see, the spaceship didn't come. Nope. I don't know who the 44,000 was supposed to be. Everything about him was a lie. Down to his ancestry, him being related to the Al Mahdi when he was born in New Jersey. He's never had never completed high school, only have a GD. Like, everything he told was a lie. So it's like, it's hard to believe anything that he's saying, because everything that he said was a lie.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting, because with all the lies that were taught, a lot of the people who may have when we were taught in to teach this stuff and to take the Bible, the Quran, and show the inconsistencies, the contradictions, the historical inaccuracies. So he being the one who's supposed to be behind all of this, and we being his soldiers, anything he says based on something you can find and say, well, that quote is there, so that must be true. You then to say, well, everything he says is true. And that was when he was able to start bringing in his teaching or his doctrine. Remember, I don't know if you remember him saying this, but this is what we were always told. And he even said it in one of the Brooklyn classes. I came giving you what you think you want, so you'll learn to think on the level of what I really have to give.
Right. I remember that.
That's what he said. And now we see, this is what you wanted to get rid of all that, and then bring in your own doctrine, your ideology. And part of that was taking advantage of people, not only monetarily, but also physically. And this brings me to a question that I wanted to ask you, Anna, is you were there when the raid took place. And there's a lot of different stories of I
was.
So when they came in and they were saying they were guns blazing, what was the situation that took place from what you witnessed, and how it came to be, and what was the reaction, and just give us an idea of what it was like. Put us there.
I mean, at the time when the FBI had came in, I didn't know they were coming because I didn't hear anything, and I was inside the building, and it was me and another girl that was with me, and it was a bunch of noise going on, and I just remember me and her was running, through the building. I was like, okay, what is going on? And then I remember looking through a peephole, must have been outside the window or something, and I saw FBI agents surrounding the building, and through every crack you could look through, they had their guns, their rifle pointed at the building. And I was I remember saying to the girl, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm scared. And then I was I didn't know why they were there, what was going on. And they started telling us come outside the building, because they jumped inside the buildings and they had tear gas and whatever else. And we slowly started coming out. We had to put our hands up, and they, patted us down, made sure we didn't have any weapons or anything. And we had to put our hands on our head. And, we started walking by one. And then they told us to go in the temple, because they were questioning the children there. And then they were questioning different people. And they said, who wanted to leave and who wanted to stay. And I remember I had my hand up. I was like, I'm ready to go. Get me out of here. So I was on the side, ready to go. But, it was traumatic, because a lot of the children were younger too. And some of them had guns, being held to their heads, and they were under the bed hiding or in the closet, because, nobody knew what was going on. We didn't know that they were coming, because we didn't hear anything. And we just saw a bunch of them, just coming in there and stuff. And it was a army tanker truck I remember seeing, and it men jumping out of there, and helicopters. I mean, I was like, okay, what is going on? But and I remember asking somebody can we call the police? And it was they are the police. I was like, and my first thought was I guess we're just gonna die. That's what I was thinking. But yeah, you know, after they questioned everybody and they asked who wanted to leave and who wanted to stay, you know, you were free to leave off the land if you wanted to, and some people could stay if they chose to, and some people did choose to stay, and some people chose to go, and you know, that was that.
I see. Okay. Interesting. That was a question because it's always been this, you know, question about, okay, one group said, what was it like? How did it go down? You know, and I think that's just good. You able to explain that.
And defects came up there around that time.
That was what I was
4 years later,
Yeah.
4 or 5 years later, to check on, you know, the kids and probably other kids that were allowed to continue being abused because they came 4 or 5 years later, you know, to raid, you know, the land or whatever else. But they did come that time to question the kids, but I never seen them any time before then, you know, on the land or at all.
Wow. I can't even imagine that. That had to be.
Yeah, it was traumatic.
So, and with all of that going on, and from what you had already known, I mean, did you know what they were there for?
No, like I said, when they came, I didn't know, you know, I didn't know anything. But I remember them saying in the temple that, I'm trying to think, did they ever tell us that he got arrested? I don't know. They might have announced it, I'm not sure. But like nobody really knew like what they came there for.
So in the course of that,
I don't mean to break your bill, but I do want to let you know that Brother Ampu's on the panel.
Okay, I see you. I'm not going to be on much longer anyway. And I just want to hit this last part. When you were when they were questioning individuals, or even this, I want to say this because there's some people who say that when they got arrested or I'm sorry, when they were taken into custody, everybody said nothing happened, as if they're supposed to say yes, it happened. My question to you is, was York telling or instructing those people that he was molesting that if they were to go to the doctor or if they were taken, not to say what was going on?
I mean, like a lot of them, they probably were already scared and, you know, brainwashed and whatever else. But I remember it was like probably like, I'm trying to think, I'm not sure how long ago before the raid, but I do remember him saying one time that if you ever get asked by the police or whoever else, if anything ever happened, to tell them that nothing happened. I remember him saying that. And I think, I remember him saying that. And it was Habiba around, and it might have been Kathy from what I'm thinking, but I remember him, you know, mentioning that to me. I don't know if he told the other, you know, victims around him or any of the other, you know, girls to say it too. But I know I do remember hearing him say that.
Okay.
But a lot of them, they were scared themselves. So that's, you know, why they didn't say nothing. And eventually some of them, wind up.
Yeah, like before that had even happened. I mean, sometimes in the past, you know, they just mentioned, you know, don't if you go, because I remember in reading some of the testimony that when certain individuals did get examined, they had mentioned that they can't. He said, don't tell. Just say that was one of your boyfriends that did it.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You got that.
Mm-hmm.
I think would y'all wanted to say something?
Okay.
Oh, peace to the panel. Peace. Can y'all hear me?
Hello.
Yeah,
yes, we hear you.
All right. So peace to the panel. Everyone, I'm coming in late, so I don't want to deter, you know, kind of change up the way the conversation is going or anything. So I'm just gonna kind of fall back and listen in some more, so I could jump in if I wanted to kind of make a point or ask a question.
Oh, you can talk. We already got like out most of what we were talking about.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I missed a lot of it, so I'm not sure if something I may comment on or ask. Y'all already
Yeah,
know.
so I can tell you where we were at, Saber. We talked about we had a video of the tribute that went through Brooklyn, and then after that it took us to Georgia on the land, and we saw how the land was constructed and how they talked about it, the neighbors around, the farmers in the area, and so forth. We had Brother King, very passionate brother, speak about his experiences on with York and the whole situations and being raised in it, mother, father, so on and so forth. And then we had Sister Anna, who was just speaking. She was speaking about her experience. Chuck was asking the questions about how things were around the land at the time that that it was raided. And of course, you already know Sister Ruby and her experiences. But pretty much everybody got out their experiences dealing with Dr. York, and even what some people call claims centered around did he molest or did he not, and how everybody who speaks out is basically the devil or demonized for speaking their truth or going against him and his influence. One of the biggest things that comes up is how is he able to influence and manipulate the minds of the masses, so to say. Other than that, none of the legal stuff or anything like that came up. And it's just been about people's experiences on the land and personally dealing with him.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I don't know if you all talked about specific things, but I do wanted to bring up some things and maybe you all can speak to it, if you choose to or not. One of the things, and by the way, this is for people who are listening on the audience. I have this avatar up. I don't normally use this avatar. I only use this avatar of Ampu because that's what people knew me by as a Nuwaubian, and Anabu or Ampu. But everybody knows that this is Wujawu. But so here's one I wanted to bring up or kind of bring to or ask a question. So as far as you all on the panel, I'm sure you all remember there was a couple of years ago, quite a few years ago now, that Kathy Johnson's son wrote a poem online. And that poem that he wrote online, it was on Facebook, and it triggered, it like changed, it like almost like a bomb went off when he wrote that poem, and then people came out to attack him. And then a lot of people came out also to defend him. And so are you all familiar with that? Anybody?
Yeah. Yes.
So I heard about it, but I don't know what it actually said.
Okay. So he wrote the poem, and then all of a sudden it kind of changed the whole climate of everything. So at that point, some of the people who were helping out York as far as the legal case was concerned, it was at that point that everyone realized publicly that even the people who helped him during the trial in 2004, at least at that point when the poem was released online, that they no longer supported it, that they actually said that, hey, I lied on the stand, I tried to help by lying, but now, yes, that stuff really did happen, and et cetera, et cetera. So my question, or if you all can speak to it, like what built up to that? Like what happened to kind of make Kathy's son, and I'm not saying their names just out of respect, but make Kathy's son write the poem, or everybody just came to the defense and just started speaking their mind and just started speaking up. It was like, it was just a big, big, big change. It was so many people, so many comments on different threads on Facebook. It lasted for about a month.
Maybe he got tired of holding that secret inside, and he had to let it out because it was eating him up. That he was lying for so long, about the whole thing, and like he knew the truth, but he was just lying for so long. Maybe he just got tired of holding it inside. He just had to let it out. And it's like, especially when everybody knew that this man was a pedophile and he was doing this, molesting boys and girls. But some people were afraid to speak out because, of like people coming after them or just, whatever, they were just scared. So it's like, maybe he just finally had that courage and like, I'm going to let it be known. This happened to me and just, put it out there.
So what about...
I think one of the reasons why a lot of people came out to defend him was that, I mean, when you think about it, it's like a domino effect. You just got to take that one person, to be courageous enough to step out and say, hey, this is really what happened, and to tell the truth. And then what happens then is you have those individuals who say, wait a minute, if this person can do it, I can come out and say, I can follow up and say, this really did happen and come out. And I think to touch up on what Anna was saying, I think not just him who probably was just fed up with it. I think so many other people were so already fed up with it because they realized that, a lot of people are messed up as a result of all of this, and I think the older we get, the more we realize how effed up we are as a result of this. And it comes to, you always get to a point in your life when you get to a certain age where that strength comes out of you and say, you know what, I don't give a fuck what people think. I'm gonna say what I want to say and what needs to be said. And I think that's what's happening now. Even for myself, for a long time, I didn't say anything. I remember when the raid happened, I was in high school. I was focused on trying to graduate and thinking about where I was going to take my life next. I was trying to stay away from it as much as possible because I was like, that's a part of my life that I really don't want to revisit. But another aspect of that was fear. I didn't have the courage to really come out and really talk about that on a public level. And so, now I'm 35, I'm at an age where, at this point, I don't really care what people think. And so I have that strength now to come out and speak up. And I think that's what's happening right now is so many people were old enough to realize, like, you know what, it's time to get this off our shoulders. It's time to begin the healing process because we are messed up as a result of it. We are.
Mm-hmm. And it's a process. Some people, for me, coming in, I moved in when I was 17. I didn't grow up in there, but I couldn't live with the Mukminati, with the girls because I had a mate, so I lived with the sisters, but I got angry, so what I wrote was a journal. It started as a journal because I needed to heal, just from that experience. But when I saw how the children that had the courage to speak up, how they started dropping out, retracting their statements because they were getting threatened, it made me angry. So I wanted to tell my experience and with the hopes that it would give the courage for other people to speak out and stand strong in what happened. And to show my support, and I think it's the process because there are a lot of people who it's so painful and it's such a letdown and disappointment that some people don't even want to deal with it. They just want to move on with their life. And I've gone through that too. Like after that, I've dropped off, stopped talking about it because it's very painful. It's very disappointing. And it's painful to know that all of these children that was supposed to have been raised a certain way were just damaged and ravaged, raped, violated, attacked, and the pain, sometimes it's something you just want to like take a break from or just bury your head in the sand from or walk away from or not even deal with, so King, I get what you're saying because it would be helpful for people who now understand what the mistake is, or come to the realization that this is where they were back then, but now they're in a different place to come forward and say and speak on it. But sometimes in their healing process, it's hard for them to relive and rehash all that again because they're coping with it in that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a process for everybody, you know.
And I think one of the reasons why I come off so passionate is I recently lost my older brother about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years now.
I'm so sorry.
And one of the reasons why I'm very passionate about it, because my brother was messed up from being raised in the community and a lot of other things that happened, and that he never made amend or even sort of like fix his relationship with our parents. Mm-hmm. And he died, you know, wanting to do that for so many years. But because of my parents' pride, their stubbornness, or whatever the reason is, and the fact that they don't really want to have a conversation about what happened to us in the community, you know, he was never able to resolve those issues. You know, and when I see that, it just makes me so angry, particularly at my parents, you know, and other parents too, because some other parents had children who lost. There was quite a few of us who passed on, you know, who had other problems, who never resolved those things with their parents. And so that's why I come off so passionate about the whole accountability piece, you know, because my point is that let's fix this stuff right now.
Exactly.
Yes, there are so many of us who are broken, but it's never too late. We can be fixed, you know. We can never erase the past, but we can move on. And the first thing we have to do, particularly the parents, is start taking accountability for what happened in the community, because it wasn't just all York. Yes, he's a bad person in my opinion. He's everything that everybody has said about him negatively and more. But it wasn't just him. He's not the only one responsible for all of this.
Right.
And so let's talk, let's have these conversations. Let's start apologizing to your children who you allowed to endure this stuff. Let's say, you know what, I'm sorry. Let's start off by saying, I'm sorry this happened to you. You know what I mean? Let's fix this stuff. Let's not let our generation of children and so many others pass on without resolving and making amends with their family. I don't even have a strong relationship with my parents, mainly because of issues dealing with the community. You know, I don't trust my mother. I can't have a conversation with her. And I don't get along with my dad because he's a Nuwaubian, you know. And to me, as a son, watching your father, who's supposed to be your creator, your protector, worshiping, basically, and I'm saying that literally because this is my experience, this is what I see, practically worshiping the man who fucking raped and molested you. You can't imagine how I feel. You know, I am made in the image of you. Every time I see you, every time I look at myself, I see you. You are my creator. You are my protector. But yet I have to sit there every time I see you. I look at you walking around with this bullshit ass Nuwaubian outfit that you got, a costume you got on, and you got this big ass picture of this York man, whatever, displayed wherever you want to put it. And I gotta look at you and say, you know what, you're my dad, and you're worshiping the man who fucking raped me. Like, you can't imagine how that feels for a person.
I want to say something.
You need to take them pictures and just tear that shit off the wall.
That don't do nothing because you still, you know. But see, that's what I'm saying. Just let's fix this stuff. Let's have these conversations. Let's start apologizing. Let's build the family back up.
Know? And heal.
Yeah,
let's
heal.
Together.
Let's heal from all this.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Wood Joe.
I was just gonna say that there's a big issue because what you're saying is something that is probably absolutely necessary, but to bring that to fruition, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take an acceptance of a lot of things that people are just not ready to accept. And there's cognitive dissonance at the highest degree that's going on.
Yes.
And this is something that people have to understand, because hindsight is 20/20. In real time, people are not seeing it the way that you can see it in hindsight after the fact. We could look backwards and say a whole lot, as opposed to in real time living it and actually being in that state of mind. And so to bring it to fruition, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of planning and a lot of surgical conversations that's going to have to, kind of jolt that psychological, place that a lot of people are in. Because during the trial, for example, you had parents who actually testified against their children.
Right. Right.
During the trial.
Right.
And just imagine, this is for people who always want to know how come the children in these situations, whether it's the York case or other cases, why they don't come forward and tell anybody. And the thing is that when they do, they're disbelieved. They're called a liar. They're made out to be the trouble person. And so you have, in this instance, you had a person who testified on what happened to them, and then their parents testified against them and called them a liar. And so people have to understand that these things actually happen in real life. And so how do you deal with that? So imagine that person who testified and said these things happen, and then they can't turn to anybody, only her brother actually. And like I said, I'm not mentioning any names out of respect, but only her brother supported her the entire time. One of her brothers, her other brother and her parents testified against her and said she's lying. And so imagine her mind state, like during that time period. Here she is, she's saying these things happen or whatever the case is, but now she don't have anybody to turn to. And luckily she had one brother that supported her, took her in and did everything, you know. And those who know, I'm talking about, they know, but I'm saying these things are real. And so to go from there to having a like some kind of intervention meeting or something with parents, that's necessary, but that's going to take some realistic, strategic, surgical planning.
Yeah, conversation.
Right. It's not going to happen overnight. It's gonna have to take something to wake people up, just enough for them to start thinking for themselves and thinking critically about what's what, and so I hear a lot of people wonder, how can all this stuff happen? How, as if, like how did York have so much power and influence and everything? And people have to understand the power of belief, and the way that it was done was done. I mean, you have psychologists who were hired, professionals who were hired to testify as expert witnesses, who write, this is things that they write about and write articles, books and things about how these things can occur. And so if anybody's wondering that, they need to look into that and read it. And then, you'll get some answers of how these things can occur, how, throughout history, not just this, but throughout history, how these things can occur, and the frailty of the mind, especially if somebody is insecure from the beginning and they get into an organization because of some insecurities from the get-go. And I think this is what Ruby was saying.
Yes.
But she was saying it as people are brainwashed when they get in, but it may not even be brainwashed to the extent of people, how they describe that, but they could be broken in some other ways.
Right.
And so they're seeking something to belong to, something to fill in some gaps in their life already.
Yes.
And when it's fulfilled, they hold on to it like nothing, like it's the end of the world. And so they build their whole identity around it. And so if you strip it away, it's like you're stripping away their identity. And so they feel like they won't even exist. They'll be lost without it. And you got to understand that this stuff is real, and it's like as real as this wall in front of me is to them, but it's psychological. It's purely mental. But that's what we have to deal with. That's what people have to understand. So I just wanted to kind of make sure people have that understanding. It's not easy, and I don't think anybody thinks it easy.
Yeah, thank you.
But it's very, very. I don't think people know how difficult it is. I know people don't think it's easy, but this stuff is. It messes with the very fiber of your being. And that's why either people left and are very, very bitter, or they stay and are devout and so loyal. There's no in between. You either go hard one way or go hard the other way. That's how it is. It's almost like breaking up with somebody, a marriage.
Yeah.
Same thing. So I just wanted to kind of
put you broke it down. You really touched on. I couldn't break it down like that, and that's in terms of people coming to grips with talking about it or owning up to it now, to their children. That it's like you said, and for King's father to still be a Nuwaubian or have any association with that is it, mentally he doesn't know who he is without that. And even to the detriment of his children, and that's the saddest damage, it's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking, the damage that this has done to our families. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No, I'm almost speechless because, but the way you broke it down is that's it right there. The very fiber of a person's being is at stake, and they don't know how to be any other way.
Right, and I'm just saying it because, over the years, people know that I've was involved with the case from ground zero, and I get all these questions. I don't deal with it anymore, but when I did, I'm aware of what people in the public are curious about, what they're thinking, and all that stuff. So I've learned to kind of be able to answer these issues, and so I know people who are watching now are wondering the same thing because it's across the board. But I wanted to bring up something else because I came in late, and unfortunately I'm not gonna be able to stay either. But I want to bring up something else that Anna hopefully could speak to. Is at one point on the land, well, let me get some context for everybody else. On the land, everyone knows the land, we had 476 acres of land. 19 of those acres were developed. That's what you saw with the brown pyramid, the black pyramid, and all that good stuff. But there was also another location in Athens, Georgia, that the office and administration would do some work out of. And so at one point, there was a time where people would go back and forth. People lived on the land, but they would work in Athens. And so at one point, it was a back and forth thing, taking a trip to go to work and then come back and stuff. So around this particular time period, at some point, there was an issue with the younger folk. I won't say children, but like younger teenage or children were instructed to write a letter to explain how they felt about York or something along those lines. That everybody was writing letters, and it was a big issue about that. So I don't know if Anna if you know what I'm talking about, if you could kind of speak to that or whatever. What was that all about? Because
who were they writing? Who were they writing a letter to, and about what?
It was a few writing letters on how they felt about York, and it was to keep a record. So, and the reason why I'm bringing this up because that came up in during the discovery of the case. It wasn't brought up in the trial and made an issue out of it, but it was brought up as if somebody like, because a lot of people want to know how come any parents or other people come forward and say et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at one point it seemed like that was actually occurring or about to occur, where it came to a point where, okay, the children were told to write letters on how they feel about York and how they live and how they feel about living on the land and all this and that. So I'm not sure if you remember or familiar with that.
No, I don't ever remember hearing anything about that. I mean, I don't ever remember writing a letter, and I don't remember anybody else writing letters.
Okay.
Unless somebody was writing those letters for the children, because I don't remember writing any letter at all.
Okay. So that's good. So because I wanted it firsthand. So if you don't know anything about it, then that's that then.
Mm-hmm.
But it did come up. And like I said, I don't want to mention any names out of respect, but one in particular name came up with all of that, as well.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, well, I was gonna hope somebody speak on it, but that's all right. So
yeah, I never heard about that.
Okay, because there's people that left, and just to give a little bit of context as well, is from the perspective of like the brothers living on the land and everything, or even just in general, you know, from 1997 or 98, 97-ish, 98 is when the organization went through started a battle with the Edenton Planning and Zoning and the rezoning and all that kind of stuff, the Planning and Zoning agency. And so we were trying to build things on the land, and we always felt that we were being blocked and so on and so forth. So for years we were fighting back and forth with the officials in town, with the land, about the building permits and Ramsey Social Club and all this other stuff, the Black Pyramid, Brown Pyramid, everything. And so that kind of escalated and kept escalating to the point where come 2002, York was arrested. Everybody around that situation thought that it was a continuum. Like people didn't see that as a separate issue. They thought it was just a continuum, like the officials just stepped up their game to, you know, mess with the organization, to tear down a Black leader and this and that. That was the sentiment of mostly of everybody, you know, during that time. You know, the time that he was arrested. And so in a lot of people's mind, they didn't believe what the allegations were in the very beginning because of that. And I'm only saying this because, you know, people are like, well, what happened? You know, they were like, why didn't anybody say anything? And I heard you all talk about the raid itself and what happened and how to interview everybody in the temple and stuff like that. But people have to understand that this didn't just happen. We weren't there on the land and everything was rosy peachy. And then all of a sudden, May 8th, 2002, bam, they came to execute the search warrant and raided the land. No, it was an ongoing thing from the building and zoning stuff that people didn't look at. It wasn't like a big difference type of thing. It was like,
and it was also people doing things like behind, like to the local officials too, like to Sills over here were killing a dog or something like that, putting it on the patio, throwing rocks at the window. So it was like things they were doing, slashing tires, you know. So they was like ruffling feathers with the local, you know, people like authorities or whoever in town that was causing them to react the way they were towards the Nuwaubians. And when they were making them flyers, remember all those flyers they would make talking crap about them? So that as well was, you know, like giving them fire to be like, okay, we got to get these people out.
Exactly. And not only that, the permits, you know, and I explained this before, but like, let's say Ramsey Social Club, that's what a lot of people know about. That building was only permitted, a permit was only submitted for it to be a storage building. And a lot of people felt that, okay, you know, the officials are messing with a Black organization, with a Black leader and you know, racism and stuff, not realizing that every single permit that was put in was not for what the building or the structure had ended up being. So the social club was only permitted for a storage facility with very limited electricity for just those overhanging lights. But yet it was a full-fledged club with bathrooms, with a store, with a DJ booth, with a restaurant,
sure was.
with a kitchen, and the whole nine.
Oh my God.
And it was advertised on Fox 5. So can you imagine the townsfolk coming? Of course they're gonna say something. They're gonna like, wait a minute, where is this at? You know, so that actually started the battle. And this is prior to 2002. So I'm just giving context for people to understand that that's the state of mind that people were in, that, you know, we were the Black organization, you know, do for self, United Nuwaubian Nation of Moors. We have our own this, our own that, own flag, own language and everything.
Money.
Yeah, all of that good stuff, passport or whatever to get on the land, all this other kind of stuff. So that climate in my state folded over and just merged with the actual criminal things that came in 2002. So I just want to say that because people demonize, like people ask questions and they tend to not believe what you say if you just answer their question, because they don't have any context. And I always like to try to provide context so people could just calm down and really realize what time it really is, as opposed to victimize or demonize even the people who've been through it,
right.
You know. And so I just wanted to make sure that was made clear. But I'm not able to stay, but I just wanted to say that, and you know, I think that you all speaking on it. See, it's like even from and Chuck put it up, so I'm gonna say his name, Issa's poem. I didn't realize that was 2009. That's 11 years ago now. That's 11 years ago. Like that's as old as my youngest daughter. And I'm like, man. So this stuff has been going on, and I know that people don't want to keep talking about it over and over and over again. At some point, you got to move forward and everything. But at some point, maybe something has to be done on a larger scale to tell the story. You know, I know there's been smaller bits and pieces, and people one individual at a time, but maybe something on a massive level needs to be put together to where everything is told from that perspective, and then they can kind of close the chapter and let it be, you know.
I agree.
Yeah.
I see Tariq. I see Talut is in the chat. He said he knows about the letters. And I wonder if Tariq knows about
who's Talut?
Talut is boy son. Talut.
Oh, he said he knows about the letters on the land.
Yeah, that was mentioning. Yeah, I wonder if Tariq.
Okay, I would like to hear about that because I never heard about that.
I think Tariq knows. I think Tariq knows also. I think I heard him talk about something about some letters that either his. But I think he was talking. I'm not sure if I'm confusing it, so I don't want to give out any misinformation.
Okay. Nah, I think he knows. Yeah, because I think his you know, like I said, I'm trying not to mention names out of respect, but Tariq is in the building, so maybe he could speak to that. But I'm not able to stay, so I don't know if y'all invite him on or whatever. But I was bringing that up because that was an issue. That was a big issue, and at that point, maybe something was going to be said that everybody wondering why wasn't it said, you know, and then how it was okay. Tariq said he's not sure about those particular letters. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, but anyway, I have to go, but yeah. So y'all keep doing what you're doing, and you know, what you're doing. I've been online with Ruby before.
Yeah.
It's my first time.
It's good to hear from you, Ujam.
All right, no problem. And Anna, it's good to hear from you. You know,
okay.
And nice to meet you, Anna and Malik. And I have King. I have to.
King, my first time meeting. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with you because you probably was in way before.
From upstate New York.
Okay, yeah, I moved in '97. I moved on land.
Oh yeah, I was been gone. I was out by '93.
Oh yeah, you went through the change of the right knowledge, the move from down to Georgia. Okay.
And let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt real fast. I'm gonna have to go. I appreciate.
We're gonna be wrapping it up
Anna. Too. I appreciate you coming, Anna. I really
no problem.
King, you know, we're gonna talk. But I gotta run about the house because I'm already late. I appreciate Jaru. I thank Garfield for allowing us access. Sean, Monica, everyone, Ruby, of course, my heart.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
We got to do it again. I hate to rush this thing off because there's so much more ground to cover. And Jaru, of course, is always in the way he just try to make it simplify it. I'm going to have to go. So, Monica, you take control. Sean, you take it from here. I got to run. I appreciate everyone for listening, watching, and, we'll keep it going. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. And I have to go. But King, it was a pleasure to meet you. And Anna, a pleasure to meet you. And good to hear from Ujam and Chuck. You know, y'all my brothers, you and Ujam, you know. and Anna is my sister, King, my brother. I love y'all. I wish y'all healing, continued healing, all of us.
Okay. Same to you. Thank you.
You know, reach out, you know, and hopefully we can speak again. Okay.
Okay. Have a good night.
All right. Good night, Sean. Whoever else came on the panel. All right, have a good night.
Peace.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else have anything to say, but I'm about to head out soon.
Okay.
Okay. King, you got anything else, man, for the audience, man?
I mean, I think we covered a lot. It was a great conversation, great discussion. We could definitely do this again, do another part to this. But
maybe next time we can bring the parents on.
Hey, it would be a start. You know, it would definitely be a start. But I definitely want to thank, in particular, Tariq Noel, because he was one of the individuals who, when I saw or really getting into following everything, that inspired me to get out there and start speaking my story. And afterwards, I've been in contact with him. We've had conversations and so on, but he's really been one. Seeing him out there and just going out there on a limb on his own, you know, with very little support, has kind of like motivated me to get out there and be inspired a little bit to speak up a little bit. So definitely give a shout out to him. And I appreciate being on this platform. Monica, thank you for having me. And Anna, you know, I'm going to call you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to talk for sure. I'm going to have to set you straight.
Oh, you're going to set me straight? Okay.
Yep.
All right. We'll see about that. But no, definitely great conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Have a good night.